Good morning or good afternoon. We'll call the meeting to order. The Monday, August 2nd, 2010 City Council Informational. The City Clerk, Chief of Council Operations, has no report. We just one housekeeping chore, though. We wanted to move our open discussion item on the Event Center to after the presentations today. So if there's anybody here, just so you know that we're going to talk about the Event Center last today. And now we'd like to welcome the Mayor. And Mayor, if you got anything you'd like to share with us.
Councilor Jameson, thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I think if there is a hot topic going on over the last 4 days in Sioux Falls, it's certainly the weather and how it has created flooding situations in our great city. I wanted to provide an update to the City Council as well as to the people of Sioux Falls. And to do that, I thought I would go directly to the people that are the experts at this. And we'll give some very, very brief updates, but also allow you some opportunity, City Council, to ask some questions as well. What I'd like to do is, why don't I start with a couple of updates. I'm going to start with Regan Smith. Regan, would you mind coming up, please? Regan has been leading our efforts over the last 4 days. We'll continue to lead them in the weeks to come. He's in charge of our emergency management efforts here in Sioux Falls. I'll ask him to give us a brief update, and then we'll just continue to go there. And in respect to your time, City Council, we'll try to be as brief as possible, but also try to give you as much information as you want. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask these good folks. So, Regan, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Regan Smith, Risk and Emergency Management. As you know, we've been facing a cycle of large rain events that really began overnight last Thursday, and various city departments have been responding to the event, and we activated our city multi-agency coordination team, which was made up of Public Works, Police, Fire, Health, Parks, and many other entities within the City of Sioux Falls. The Red Cross is also part of that, and Emergency Management. On Friday, we did have issues with the Tudhill lift station. We've got Mark Cotter that can speak a little bit better than I can to that. We have recovered that facility, and it is operational. We are still discharging to the Big Sioux River at this time. We did experience, we've got 125 reports of sewer backup at this time, and risk management is working with those residents. We've contacted all but 11 of those at this time, and we're working to assist them with our city ordinance relief program at this time. We can talk about that if you want also. As we look into the next week, we are looking at severe weather this afternoon. After 4 today, there's a slight chance of rain, and then on Wednesday, a larger chance of heavier rain. We're really looking at we're in a cycle. There's a trough between South Dakota and Nebraska, and it's moving north and south every day or two, and it's very hard to predict the amounts. As we move through with this, smaller amounts of rain are definitely going to have effects on the city that normally wouldn't. We do have saturated ground, and when we do have in that situation, trees could be down a little easier. So if we do have a severe wind event, even as low as 40 miles an hour, we could expect something like that. Also, we've dispatched a light crew from our light division to offer mutual aid to the city of Parker. They're experiencing some electrical outages, so we've got a crew out there. Water reclamation and street is pre-positioned pumps in the Pam Road area, and then in the Sertoma Oxbow area, just in case we need to bypass or pump those areas at this time. With that, I don't know if any of the other departments want to kind of fill in any of the holes. That's just a real quick overview.
Regan, thank you. And in the spirit of City Council, Regan knows a lot about a lot of different things, but I thought maybe what we do is briefly bring up all the department heads, and then if you have questions for Regan or anybody else, I think that'll make it more efficient and more productive use of your time. Sue Quambeck, and Sue, I don't know if you wanted to give an update as well. Sue is the department head who's in charge of central services, and part of that involves, of course, emergency management. Sue?
I had a further breakdown as of an hour ago anyway for your information in terms of the homeowners that have contacted us thus far. Out of the 114, 27 have indicated that they do have insurance. 26 say that they do not, and 57 don't know. And then 7 were not eligible for assistance because it wasn't sewer backup. So that's a breakdown of those that have contacted us through, like I said, about an hour ago. So out of those that do have insurance for sewer backup, then what the city would be doing is paying their deductible for them and then letting their insurance kick in. So their deductible could be anywhere from, I don't know, $100 to $1,000. This is generally what it is. And we don't know, so I can't give you a definitive breakdown of what the cost is going to be, but so far, there are 26 that have indicated they know they don't have insurance. So that could, for those folks that don't, then for the no-fault sewer backup ordinance, it would be up to $5,000. And again, for the cleanup. So that's where we're sitting on that. We talked this morning about educating the public in regards to their sump pumps and where their water is going. And we decided that it's probably good for us to do what we can, especially within the next day or so, to educate the public as much as we can, to let them know that it is not okay for them to direct that sump pump water to their floor drain, for example. So what we're doing is we're printing these as I speak. These are door hangers with information about what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. On the back of it is a copy of the city ordinance that tells them what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. The front is just, remember, it is a violation of city ordinances to discharge a sump line into the sanitary sewer system. And then it has phone numbers for additional information. So the plan would be that starting as early as tomorrow morning, that we would start hanging these in the areas affected, the ones that are affected most anyway, just to get that education piece out there. The other thing we're doing is we've been in contact with Deanne Teedy this afternoon from the school district, and she has offered her assistance with their, I think it's called Connect Ed voicemail system, so that we can put out an alert to the people that have people in the public school system anyway, they have children in the public school system. She's willing to do that. So we just need to finalize the content of that, and then she can record it for us and get that broadcast out. And again, for the same reason, just to educate people on the importance of discharge to the right location. And then the other thing, the third thing we're doing in terms of education is we're working on a video this afternoon, just a 2-3 minute segment. Again, just to make sure that people are aware of what they should be doing with their sump pump water and what they shouldn't be doing. So we're shooting that right now and hope to have the shooting of that completed in the next hour or so. We'll get it edited together. And if everything goes as planned, we hope to have something ready for the 6 o'clock news cycle. At the very least, what we'll do is have it available on the city's website. There'll be a link there, and then any of the news agencies can just go to that link to get the video. And then we will plan to incorporate it into Channel 16 as soon as it's ready. I think that's all I had.
So thank you. That's probably a good lead-in from Mark Cotter. Mark is here. He's the department head in terms of public works. And Mark, you can give a couple of updates, of course, on all of the way the city's been impacted.
All right. Again, I won't try to cross over. Regan's already told you that the lift station we are still bypassing. We did reach a point last night at about 2 a.m. where we had stopped bypassing to the river. But as we've seen, morning flows that normally pick up around 7, we had to return to bypass to the river. The key push today is that we're just seeing so much extraneous flow coming into the sanitary sewer system, and one of the most controllable things that we can do is just to make sure that people are educated about where their sump pump discharge should and should not be, And with the efforts of Sue Kwan-Beckett and her team and others, we should really be able to push that out, and then we're going to take that to another level, too, as we start to see some of these concentrated areas. Essentially, if you have 4 people that are on an 8-inch gravity sewer, and 4 of them are discharging their sump water into that sewer, only 4, that can overload that 8-inch sewer, and then essentially creates a water plug, and then everyone upstream of that can get backed up with sewer. And I think one of the things we see in these types of rain events when they've gone for 60 days now, and the ground is so saturated, people that have potentially never used their sump pump are using their sump pump. And people that have never seen water come in through their cement walls are seeing it come in. And when those things happen, sometimes the most immediate thing to do is to let it go down to your sanitary sewer system. The key is that our sanitary sewers are not designed to take both sanitary sewer and groundwater and or rainwater. And so we're going to educate people. If we see them doing that, there's some quick fixes. They can get some soft hose to go right from a sump pump out a basement window until they can get a plumber in to actually do a hard pipe. So that's our key push this week, to segregate those flows. We're also had a substantial amount of landfill traffic. And so we did expand the hours yesterday, had some very appreciative customers come through the landfill. Over 200 vehicles came through, and then we will expand our hours all this week, and we'll gauge that based on traffic volume to see how long we have to run extended hours. But we certainly know cleanup efforts can take a period of time based on the type of damage that you had. So that's the secondary thing that we're attempting to do. And then last, just anytime we discharge wastewater to the river, we immediately go into a river monitoring plan where we're testing the water upstream of the discharge and downstream, and we'll do that at the intervals that are prescribed to us just to gauge the health of the river. But it is an extremely small fraction of the river flow, and the river's flowing very quickly. And so as soon as we can stop discharging, we certainly will. That's what I have there.
Mark, thank you. And then that's a perfect tie-in now for Jill Franken. Because there is discharge going into the Big Sioux, it certainly becomes a public health issue as well. Jill can provide an update on that, and then we'll go to parks and how that is impacted because of the public health needs. So, Jill, please.
Sure. Very quickly, as you know, on Friday, as a result of the flooding and the issues around that and the sewer backups, we did declare the public health emergency on Friday, which then brought with that information that we shared with the public on ways that they should be working with the sewer backup issues, and that would really go for any flooding because, any flooding water is going to be filled with things that you're not sure about, but for sure when they know it's a sewer backup, they have to be taking additional precautions and cleanup precautions, and that information was put on our website, on siouxfalls.org, as well as the health's website. And then we also, in visiting with the State Department of Health and Lon Keitlinger, also put some additional information from the State Department of Health website as well, and are keeping them informed. We also just visited with our health systems just to make sure that they're aware of what's going on, and should they start seeing increased traffic flow of people that are dealing with illnesses that are possibly related to issues with coming into contact with these pathogens that are in the water, that they should be alerting us and alerting the state so that we can be providing additional resources that are available as needed. We're also working with the other departments, such as parks, as the mayor alluded to, as far as how we should be appropriately cleaning those surfaces that have been coming into contact downstream of the lift station, such as some of those park equipment and such things. So we're working through those details and making sure that we're getting good evidence-based recommendations made to the park department. Beyond that, I think that we are just continuing to look at other issues related to staying away from the floodwaters, in addition to the bacteria and fungus and mold and all those things that are involved. It's just simply still the danger that exists in the currents, and making sure that people are paying attention to that there's things happening under the water that they don't even know about. So that's additional concern at this time. So we'll continue with getting information out and work through that.
Don, would you mind coming up? Don is the department head with Parks and Recreation. Don, an update, please, on the parks and how they've been impacted by the floodwaters.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. As you probably realize, when the river flood, it impacts significantly our Greenway Trail system, one of our most popular amenities. And right now, the trail is either underwater or the trail itself is covered in silt or mud as a result of the floodwaters. From Yankton Trail all the way up to Cherry Rock Park. The Cherry Rock restroom has received some water due to some of the recent higher floodwaters in the past few days. As Jill mentioned, we do have a plan for, it looks like bleach. Bleach solution is going to be the best solution for sanitizing those facilities that people would come into contact with, along with pressure washing, as we do with some of the trail surfaces as well. To make sure that when the waters do go back down, that it's safe for people to use. And so just reemphasize the caution of people not getting too close to the river. It's moving very fast. I know I see a lot of visitors down at Falls Park today. It's great to watch it, but certainly encourage everyone in the community to keep their distance from the river's edge.
Thank you, Don. And then Chief Hill is here as well. Chief Hill not only certainly represents the fire department, but I think could also speak well for the City of Sioux Falls Police as well. Chief Hill, any commentary in terms of things that have happened since Friday, as well as what you would urge the residents of Sioux Falls to do going forward?
Just a couple of things. First of all, I've been involved in the emergency part of it for a long time, and we had a small role there in fire this week, and studied emergency management. And I want you to know that the practice that we've had and the events that we've been through over the years have really made the city's team work really well together, from parks and health and public works, and a lot of it has to do with the coordination that Regan put into it. Has done a tremendous job. Also, Trent Lubers and Galen Huber from Public Works. It was a well-oiled machine, and they did a great job. And but there's still a lot more to do, and the message that we need to get out are the what we've talked about already about the sump pumps, and then just keeping people out of the water and away from the barricades and not going through barricades. And there's a lot of work yet to be done with this emergency, with the cleanup. This is where the hard work starts. So that's all.
Chief Hill, thank you. And to the City Council and to the people of Sioux Falls, I think that there's probably a misnomer in terms of when you look outside right now, you don't see water rushing down the roads or the sidewalks or things like that. And that's actually not the problem that Sioux Falls is faced with right now. It's the water that you don't see. It's the water that is currently in our water system that is built up to such a level that it is causing problems for at least a couple of neighborhoods in a substantial way, and potentially other neighborhoods to come. And that's why we are so adamant in terms of reaching out to all of you, asking you, please, do not put your sump pump water in your drain. Please, just go to the hardware store, get a 100-foot flexible hose from your hardware store, attach it to your sump pump, and have that water flow out into your garden, into your lawn, or yes, into your street. Because then that water is going to the river versus it's going to our water treatment plant, which is causing our issues right now. I would like the City Council to ask any and all questions. Maybe it'd be appropriate in the spirit of time if you folks would maybe come up, and then we'll have the City Council ask any questions, and I will defer that certainly to Councilor Jameson.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, if we could have the staff at least come close, and so you're not running back and forth. We'll open up to questions. Sue, Councilor Aguilar.
Director Cotter, this is the second time that the Tut Hill lift station has failed this year. What can you tell me about that? Is there something wrong with it, or is it just the overwhelming circumstance, or do we need to be doing something to make it more efficient and so that we don't continue to have these failures?
Well, we are doing a number of things. One of the key capital programs in water reclamation is to upsize the central main from the 48-inch to the 60-inch sewer. That sewer and lift station has functioned very well for the city since the 1960s, and we're just, as we move those projects forward, there's 3 key projects underway this year, and then in the capital plan there's another $22 million that's identified to finish that line segment. So that'll help, but one of the key things you see is that there is so much extraneous flow coming into the system right now that's overtaxing the system. We've got 2 different situations. Last time we had a manhole that when a large piece of ice when the ice was breaking up, actually dislodged, broke the bolts off, and actually was coming right into a manhole. That was earlier this year, and that's why that didn't take us very long to restore back to normal conditions. This was a different situation, and it's hard without a sketch of the lift station to show, but initially why we had to take it down was we had an internal issue with this amount of flow that overtaxed our pumping system, so we had to shut the system down. But truly the key is now we've had 60 days of extremely wet weather, and we are certainly seeing much more than sanitary sewer. We're seeing a lot of inflow that's coming in from likely sump pumps. Some people don't have sump pumps, and so it's just leaching right into their basement water. And naturally, if they don't have an efficient way to collect that, it's likely going to go right down the drain. But really 2 different distinct situations. We're not satisfied where this is at either, and that's why we immediately go and notify the state and go into a river monitoring plan.
So this time it didn't actually fail. It was a bypass rather than a failure, as with the first time it was the ice jam that caused it.
The ice jam the first time actually dislodged a manhole, and a significant amount of flow went right into it. Okay. We actually did have a failure in the lift station. Okay. And we had water that these lift stations on this one is probably almost 40 feet deep. And they've got significant motors and electrical systems inside them. And water was able to, I'd have to show you, but water was able to get down into the pump chambers, and to keep our team safe and to be able to dry those facilities out and then bring them back slowly after we dry them out. It's 2 distinct situations, but we can adjust. These 2 significant different times, oddly, that it's in the same year.
Thank you.
Councilor Urpenbach.
Reagan, can I have you, please? First of all, clarify for me, between you and Sue, we heard 2 different numbers on backups in basements, sewer backups. Sue said 114, you said 125.
Well, the 125, if I can give you the breakdown of that. Where did I put that information? The 125 was the total of, there was 11 missing from her number that we haven't been able to make contact with.
Okay. Then these are people that have called you and reported that they have backups.
Yes.
Would you talk about how residents can do that, make that report, and then what might be the result? Would you just explain that ordinance just a little bit more so that people understand they do have some help coming from the city?
There is information that describes what to do as far as cleanup and the relief program on siouxfalls.org, right on the front page. If you do have sewer backup, contact risk management at 367-8742. And again, just sewer backup. We don't have a program for seepage or your typical flooding. When we get those, we document it, ascertain that it was sewer backup, find out where the location was, ask the resident if they've got a sewer backup rider on their insurance coverage. And if they do, we ask them to file a claim with their insurer. We will reimburse them for the cost of that deductible. If they do not have a sewer backup rider, the ordinance provides that the city can reimburse the homeowner for their cleanup and disinfection cost for the event. This is not an insurance program, or it wasn't intended to make the homeowners whole. It was primarily there to make sure the basements are cleaned up and disinfected so there's not a future health issue. And that can be up to $5,000. So they can go out and hire a cleaner. They can tackle it themselves. There is guidance on the website to do that. And then work through risk management to be reimbursed for those costs.
Great, thanks,
You
Reagan.
bet.
So it's 367-8742.
Yes.
SiouxFalls.org has the information as well.
Yes, we've got a brochure out there that kind of describes that process, but also gives residents information on how to safely clean, how to safely deal with it as far as their family, pets, that type of thing.
Good, thank you.
You bet.
Councilor Brown?
This is probably for Jill Franken, I believe, Director Franken. Given the health concerns, and we see items out on the boulevard, is it possible under our current resources to consider like a Project Nice to help citizens who can't get their materials taken away from their home?
We have had some conversation about what are some options that may be available, and I probably would think that Mark Cotter should probably answer that as opposed to myself. Mark?
Councilor Brown, I think a couple of the key things we're in what I'd consider Phase 2. Phase 1 is, normal operations. Phase 2 is we've seen people go to work right away on Friday and then on Saturday, and so that's why we expanded the landfill hours. We've had probably close to, if our normal traffic on a Saturday is between 200 to 300 vehicles, on Saturday we had 700. And then on Sunday, we had another 200. So people are actually, initiating the cleanup and really getting the work done. We've also then expanded the hours. I think our secondary was, let's wait, let's talk to Regan and his team. Let's map and see if we've truly got some concentrated areas and what the best way to actually deliver if we actually raise that to, say, a next phase. So I would say we haven't moved to that yet. Our key is that when people come to landfill, we're going to do our best to even staff that more to help people unload. What we did on Sunday was had more people at the public drop-off. So when they came there, we were actually helping them unload. It was a steady stream of vehicles, and I think that's one of the key things we can do because people truly want to get this moved. They're eager to get it moved, and that's one of the first things that we can actually do.
Councilor Anderson?
Mark, I'm going to jump back to that pump station. When we start dumping raw sewage in the river, are we subject to any fines or anything from, like, maybe FEMA or the Corps or anything like that?
It wouldn't be the Corps. It'd be, we work daily, and we notify the Department of Environment and Natural Resources immediately, and then we go right into what they call a river monitoring plan. We want to monitor the health of the river through this process, and it's just so unusual to have this amount of water saturated in the ground for any time of the year in our area, and so. That's what we're contributing it to, is we've got so much extraneous flow trying to get into the sanitary sewer system one way or another that you just don't design these systems to take on this amount of either groundwater, sump pump water. And so, we work closely with them. I think if we were not proactive in having sump pump management, if we were not proactive with some of these occurrences, then I think the DNR would certainly look to us and say, you're just not doing enough. But we've been monitoring this, and we've got staff on board around the clock, and it's just a very unfortunate event. It's a key backbone piece of infrastructure in the sanitary sewer system, and it's served this city extremely well for decades. and we expect it to as well. We just got to move on from this cycle that we're in.
Okay, and then do we have any future plans for any other pump stations that might help not allow this to happen in the future, I guess, where we're dumping raw sewage in the river? Maybe in that area to help that pump station in case of another emergency?
Well, this lift station itself, and again, they're somewhat complex to discuss without showing you a schematic, but we don't have any other lift stations quite like this one, where this is the lift station where sewage comes in at very low elevation, and it just directly pumps it up and puts it into a trough, and then it starts to go downstream in another gravity system. We, in most cases, have sewage come to a station, and then we pump it through a force main. We basically turn it into a pressurized system for a period of downstream. We're looking at not only this, we're going to audit our facilities, just because anytime you have a rain event is you learn from those activities. But there are things that we're talking about for this lift station to just further strengthen it, so we can always protect this station. That's the key. Is we want to make sure that this station is something that we can protect, get access to moving forward.
Thank you.
Councilor Intiman.
Question for Mayor Huther. Mike, I'm assuming that each department is undergoing damage assessments as they go forward through this process. And do you have a plan to present to us, or are you going to be able to present to us and tell us about what this rain has cost us, as far as the cost of repairs that we might have to make on some of the infrastructure, whether it's on parks or streets or any of those kinds of things?
In fact, that was done not only on my account, but on account of one of the things that may actually happen, depending on the severity of the damage, is we're actually tracking each expense, whether it be manpower or whether it be other expenses incurred from this. We may actually go to the federal government and ask for some reimbursement on this. Lincoln County actually probably has a good chance that they will actually have some federal disaster funds that occur. Minnehaha County we're not quite sure of, or the City of Sioux Falls, but we are tracking those expenses today, along with the manpower hours and things like that. As well as, from the very beginning, one of the great strengths of the emergency management system is that not only is Regan reacting to what is occurring every day, but they're also analyzing what is occurring every day as well, in the spirit of strengthening this process, making it even better, so that when the next event comes, and it will come, Sioux Falls, we're even more prepared. I think that's a very fair question, Councilor Entman, is maybe we should come back in the spirit of here's what happened, here's what we learned, and here's what we're going to do to strengthen the system for next time. I think it's a very fair thing to request, and Sue Kwan-Beckett and her team, I think, will certainly help lead that effort. And we don't know when it's going to end. That's probably the one thing, is that we were not expecting the rainfall this morning. That was supposed to be further south, and of course it rained like cats and dogs. Now we're supposed to get more rain here in about a half hour. We actually hope it doesn't happen, but it may. One of the reasons why we went to all of you today and to the press this morning is that we want to make it clear that we do need the citizens' help because it's not over. And we believe we're going to be battling this for at least a couple more days, maybe even a week or two. And that's why we need the citizens of Sioux Falls help with them alleviating that water going into the drain systems, because we're not done. We're not done. And Mark, I think, can explain that better. But it's a real issue. And even though you can't see it, Sioux Falls, because the water's not flowing down the roads, the issue's still there. And it's not getting better. It was until this morning. Now we're battling it again. So, Councilor Enneman, we will get back to you. I'll let the department head, Sue Kwan-Beckett, I'll let her lead that, and we'll come back to you with some information.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Councilor Aguilar.
I was just I have a constituent that has been concerned with some of the rainfalls that we've had, that the city has automatic lawn sprinklers that are still going after some of our larger rainfalls. Is there a program in place or whatever so that at this point in time that we've got those turned off?
Yeah, we actually, in almost all of our systems, have rain sensors on our or weather stations, depending on the size of their irrigation systems. And so if they're going off, we certainly want to know about it, that either it's malfunctioned or it's not set right or whatever it might be. Obviously, we don't need any more water on the lawn. So,
And some of these were at public buildings.
okay.
Also in medians and streets, I've seen them go off.
Okay. We'll double check all those.
Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Sue, question for you about the door hangers. Who's going to take those around and hang them up?
Well, we were discussing that this morning, and we haven't worked out the logistics entirely, but Jill offered that some of her inspectors perhaps could assist us with that, and then we'll see who else we can get from various areas within the city government.
Boy Scouts.
I'm just thinking we need some volunteers, and I'm sure there's some folks watching now that might know some Boy Scouts, as
Boy
Sue
Scout
said,
troops.
or salsa groups, or those kinds of things. There are kids that aren't in school yet and would love to walk, or, there have to be groups out there that we need to maybe tap into so that we can cover that area. Some of us have covered those parts of town repeatedly this spring, and it's a lot of walking.
Okay. Well, that would be wonderful. We'll take any assistance we can get. Thank
Could
you.
it also go out with, I don't know when they send them out, our next water and sewer bill? Could it be an insert with that also?
Probably not for a while yet.
Sure.
Sue, the Helpline Center, if you call there, they actually have volunteer groups that they can line up for us in
Okay.
a pretty quick fashion, too.
All right. Good. We'll do that. Thank you.
Sue, if I could, maybe Sue and/or Jill, when the public health emergency was declared, how did you feel all the cooperation that was needed occurred? Did that all go as smooth as you'd hoped? Is there anything there that needs to be reevaluated?
I thought it went very smoothly. When I got to work Friday morning, it was the minimal necessary PIO of the EOC was already set up and ready to meet, and I had already been contacted, and we had already looked at ordinance, and was working with the attorney's office and to get the declaration crafted, and it just went very smoothly. And from that moment, then all day Friday was just meeting on that, making sure then it's one thing to make that declaration, but then you got to let the public know and be getting them engaged in understanding what they need to do to be protecting themselves. So I thought it went very well.
Okay, good.
Well, in terms of the information piece, of course, having SiouxFalls.org is great because we can post things out there, at will, and we did. So the brochure that had already been prepared in terms of how to, Regan mentioned how to keep your family safe and what to do. We got that out there immediately, and had a lot of hits to the website, so I think people are looking at it.
Councilor Jameson, with your permission as well, we also had great cooperation with the media.
Good.
We really did. I tell you, whether it was the Argus Leader or the radio stations or the TV, it probably wasn't getting the attention it needed early on, but I'll tell you, by that afternoon, the media really had stepped up to get that word out, and they're still doing that for us today. We had a press conference this morning, and we were amazed, but all the media was there, and just helping even to get the sump pump message out. I don't know if it's going to be the top story will be sump pumps, but I actually hope it is. But we've been fortunate that we've got such good media as well.
Great. On the sump pump enforcement, how do you do that even today? How do you manage that ordinance that requires that water to be outside the house? How do you do that? Anybody?
Well, it's essentially, Counselor, it's an honor system, and sump pumps and sewer backups are really can be a strange thing. They don't always just happen in the low-lying areas. They can happen up on a hill that people have natural springs that come in. And so it's not something that is easy as just going to the lowest parts of the city and expecting right now with the ground as saturated as it is that everybody should be pumping, because quite honestly, one person might have backfilled their basement and made it very watertight, and they might have used clay, and then the next two houses might have used sand, and their sump pumps might run constantly. In fact, they might have two sump pumps that run, and this person in the middle may never run a sump pump. And so it comes down to constructability measures, it comes down to where you're at. And so, I think we're going to start with education, and I think what we'll also do is that we're going to go into those low-lying areas like Pendar that normally has issues, Lada, and we're going to run a camera up that sanitary sewer in an off-peak time. And if we see half a pipe coming out of a service constantly, we know that there is groundwater that's being discharged in, and then we're going to have to knock on the door. But our first piece is education, and you may be helping yourself, but you might be affecting 6 downstream or upstream neighbors, and that's the message that we want to get out.
When you run that camera, could you just grab some of those brochures and then just run them right up into the house and drop them and then go back?
Right. We'd like to just do the plumbing while we're there so it can actually be done. But, people do the right thing. I think most people, I would venture to say, there's a lot of ordinances on the books, and not all of them, not everyone knows that that's probably a violation. And so there's going to be a pretty significant canvas today, and then we want them to call us and say, hey, I just got this. What does this mean? And we'll send somebody right out and help them understand it. We're also, I think this video that we, it wasn't very long ago, we pushed out a video just on microsurfacing and how that whole process works. We're going to do the same piece with sump pumps. And so people can visually see what we're talking about and then hopefully inspect their own and do the right thing.
Great. I'd just like to add before it's forgotten, I wanted to thank the mayor and his staff for all the work that they did on this. I know that it tests the whole system, and I think Don Hill was in charge with the city. In fact, I think while others were gone, I think you did a very good job, Don, and you should be commended, as well as all your staff, Mayor. Also, I talked to Jim Schmidt from the Lincoln County Commission. They've got some severe water issues in his neck of the woods, and I asked if there was anything that the city could do, and he said the city's doing everything they need and has always been there for Lincoln County. So keep that up. Good job. And I'd just like to make a plug that if, the honor system of not putting your sump pump down the sewer, to encourage everybody to be a part of the solution and not participate in the problem, that would be a great help. Councilor Litz, is there any questions you might have of the staff and the mayor's staff during this event?
No, we've been here before, and I have every confidence in them, and I've been following my emails, and I have no questions.
Okay, just another sign that you've kept the council up to date. You've informed the council very well, and we appreciate it. Any other questions, Mayor? Anything else?
Councilor Jameson, in the spirit of that communication, here's what we're going to do. We're going to meet as a team. Regan Smith will lead that charge, as well as then we're immediately going to hold a press conference with all of the media, our Argus Leader and the TV stations and radio. They were all there. We'll do that. As we get different information, city councilors, either I will send that to you or my team will send that to you. And to the people of Sioux Falls, if there's things that we need from you, we'll certainly let you know, but we're going to try to keep you as updated as possible. And then we're going to pray not to have rain, which is really unusual for the Midwest, but we just don't need any more rain for a while.
Thank you, and SiouxFalls.org should have everything anybody would need to know if they've got questions. SiouxFalls.org. Can't say it enough. All right, then. We'll move on to our committee reports, if we could. We'll start with the audit committee, and I have no report for that one. We'll move to the fiscal committee.
We will meet Wednesday in the chambers here at 4 o'clock. Normally, we would meet today, but because of the budget hearings we're going through, move that to Wednesday at 4. The two items will be notice of fund transfers and audit committee revisions.
Thank you. Any questions of Councilor Brown? All right, we'll move on to Land Use Committee. Bob?
We did have a meeting last week. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did have a meeting last week, and the things, it was Councilor Erpenbach, myself, and staff. The third member was not present at the time, but we went over signage and these new feather banners and banners in general. We went over revisions to zoning and what should be done to inform people that are affected in the neighborhoods. Is there some improvements that we can done, and Mr. Cooper is working on that, is my understanding, and we came forward with several suggestions, and there were several more there were several from the previous meeting that we had already incorporated into the ideas. So I think we're moving ahead with that quite well. And the other one was the RV boat parking, and that was, as most of you have found out, that's something that some people feel very deeply about. They have a lot of concerns on both sides of the fence. And originally, I had hoped to maybe bring this back to the council during the informational, but I see we do have some things, other things going on here, and what I would like to do, with your permission, Mr. Chair, is maybe we run through the open discussion, the event center, and these other presentations, and then after they are done, if we have some time, that we could devote that to one in particular, the RV boat parking, with the full council.
I think that's a great idea, Councilor Litz. We'll do that.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions of Councilor Litz? All right, we'll go on to Public Services Committee. Councilor Anderson.
Public Services Committee met with the Ethics Committee. We discussed over proposed changes to some of their processes. Those changes were given to Ethics Committee members, and we're waiting to hear back some responses from them.
Very good, thank you.
No.
Okay, any questions, Councilor Anderson? Seeing none, we'll go on to City Council open discussion. If there's something maybe in brief that we could talk about, otherwise we'll move into our presentation. So if there isn't anything, okay, very good. Let's move into our presentations, and first we'll start with recovery zone bonds. I see Mike Cooper coming forward. Mike?
Good afternoon, Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. I have been asked to give you a brief introduction to this topic today, which is going to be an overview of a financing mechanism known as recovery zone bonds. And this has come about with recent discussions of city staff, both with planning and community development, developers, of looking at ways that we can incentivize economic development in Sioux Falls. And with the recent announcement of CNA Surety moving to the Shoneman site, this is one financing mechanism that we believe will be coming forward to you for your consideration, as well as with tax income and financing. And so today, to give you an overview of how this program works, and then what role the City Council might have with approving such a project in the future that would use recovery zone bonds, we have asked two people to give you this presentation. Todd Meyer-Henry with Meyer-Henry Law Office here in Sioux Falls, as well as Toby Morris, who is with Northland Securities Incorporated, and his office is in Pierre, South Dakota. And both of these folks are very familiar with how this funding mechanism works, and again, how this may come to a City Council meeting in terms of recommendation for approval. So I'll turn it over to you guys, and you can give us the overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Commission. Toby Morris with Northland Securities. What I thought maybe I would do is just give you a brief overview of recovery zone bonds, why we're here before you today. If you recall, about a year or so ago, about a year and a half, in February 2009, part of the stimulus package or the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, there were allocations that were given either to the counties or to cities in particular. City of Sioux Falls was the one that received their own allocation. Last year, I believe you issued what was called a Quality of Life Recovery Zone Economic Development Bond. There's two types of these recovery zones, one for the public, which would be the city, schools, counties, and then one for the school, or one for the private side. Really, on the private side, what this allows is a private developer to access tax-exempt financing. In other words, a lower interest rate. The belief was that if we could have a lower interest rate for developers, it would spur the economy that much more. And I think what we have before you today is probably a great example of how that's coming about, as Director Cooper mentioned with the CNA project and choosing the Shoneman site. I think there's an exciting project in this way that this recovery zone can work. With that, though, it's needed the assistance of the city. Because you're still issuing tax exempt, you have to follow the rules of the state and you have to follow the rules of the IRS, and that's where Todd will explain the legality as the city really looking forward as a conduit issuer. And so with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Todd, unless there's any questions on the history of the recovery. Thank you.
Any questions for Toby? Okay.
I'm Todd Meyer-Henry. I'm an attorney in Sioux Falls, and I kind of specialize in municipal bonds. I represent also the South Dakota Building Authority as general counsel, work with the Board of Regents on a number of their issues, and also am disclosure counsel with the South Dakota Housing Authority. So if you have questions on how any of these deals work, you could probably give me a call and I'll run it down with you. I also was recognized nationally for writing a post-issuance compliance manual, which has been adopted by a number of most of the school districts and municipalities I represent, including Board of Regents. And I'll hand it out because a lot of things in here you may use as a resource of what are these tax-exempt bonds, how do they work, what are the questions I should be asking, because most of us get concerned with not necessarily what we know we need to ask is there something else out there that I should be asking and am not. And I'll just hand these up. This kind of goes through the whole process of all tax-exempt bonds for cities. In South Dakota, we have very few economic development tools that cities can utilize. Obviously, we have tax increment districts, which can assist in the development, and the City of Sioux Falls used a number of those. We have direct incentives that we can use and pass through to our recognized Economic Development Corporation, which also can help private industry develop. And we also have what I always call its 954 economic development bonds. And you may have seen these as an issuance like Sioux Falls, the University of Sioux Falls or Augustana College may have come to the City of Sioux Falls. 501c3 issuers like nursing homes or hospitals, cities are a conduit. The city has the power under 954. This is what the Attorney General has previously said, the city's sole economic development power. You can use that power with or without the issuance of bonds, and we have a legal opinion to that point. And basically, you can take such actions as are necessary to advance the general economic welfare and prosperity of the city and the state, and you can do so by issuing economic development bonds. How do these bonds normally work? Well, the city is the issuer of a bond. They sell the bonds to a buyer, take the proceeds, and they put them in a fund. And what they do then is loan those proceeds to a private developer. And the private developer usually issues a note, a mortgage, it'd be just like a commercial loan, and basically promises to pay back the city. And what does the city then do simultaneously with that? They assign it to whoever bought the bonds. So in a lot of South Dakota issues, we have a local bank that says, I want to assist this economic development project. And they look down and say, you know what, we could issue these as tax exempt. The interest would be tax exempt. So they go to a city or a county, which both have the power, and say, we'd like to issue economic development bonds, revenue bonds. And so the city issues the bonds. At the same time, the borrower or the developer executes a note, mortgage, maybe even a personal guarantee, and assigns it to the end bank. And that's how these things generally are placed, in South Dakota anyway. Well, 2 years ago, we had
Todd?
an interesting
Todd?
American. Yes.
Could you slow down a second?
Oh.
And
Yeah, I will slow down, and at any time that you say, I don't quite understand that, just stop me and ask me.
cover that last section again, because I think that's probably the heart of the matter.
Okay.
If you could.
These bonds are not a moral obligation of the city. The only thing that's pledged is the revenue agreement, the trust indenture that's behind. So it's a bond, promise to pay. The promise is solely if the developer pays his note to the city, and if he doesn't, you foreclose on the project. So it's a pass-through. Economic development bonds nationally, the government said for certain private activities, like hospitals, nursing homes, small manufacturing facilities, certain private water and sewer projects, we will let private industry borrow money at a tax-exempt rate. But then they scratched their head and said, well, we're not just going to allow the developer to do it themselves. We need a check and a balance. So they thought, well, let's have a local governmental entity act as that balance or as that check. And so what we will do with that local entity is we will do a number of things. One, the developer will have to come to the governmental entity and present what they're planning to do. Second, we'll make them have a hearing and publish notice so that all the neighbors in the neighborhood and anybody interested in the community can either write or show up and ask questions about the development to see if this is something that the city wants to do. And at the end of that hearing, after the fact, if in the discretion of the governing body they want to proceed, they could pass a resolution authorizing the issuance and proceed. Under South Dakota law, cities and counties are very limited. They can only pledge the note, the mortgage, or the revenue agreement, whatever the underlying financing. They can't pledge any of their own proceeds, any of their own property, no tax revenues, nothing of the cities, because that's illegal. It says solely payable from. And so when a city looks at this, one of the questions that always comes up is here, I'll jump to the question. These are the three questions, the standard questions. Do we have to do this if somebody shows up and asks us to? The answer is no. Economic development bonds under 954, only if you want to. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it if the next person shows up. You could do it for one, next one shows up and says, we changed our mind, we don't like these deals, we don't want to do it. So it's discretion. The second one is, can we stop, once we start this procedure, when can we stop this? Can we stop at the beginning or at the, once we pass a resolution? The answer is, like any other resolution you adopt, even the mayor, before the mayor signs the bonds and exchanges the bond for money, any time before that, you can stop it. You can get down to the closing and have cold feet as a city, say, no, we're not going to do this. That's up to you. That's within the city's power. And again, I just answered that one. The city pledges no money, no credit, no taxing power to pay these bonds. They're payable solely from the underlying documents, which usually looks like a commercial loan to most banks.
So, Todd, virtually no risk to the city.
If even your credit rating, the underwriters that underwrite this look at the credit of the ultimate borrower, not necessarily at the city. And we've seen some defaults in the credit ratings of the city, since they're not pledging anything, is not affected.
Because we've done these for some retirement communities, I believe, and it's always been made clear to us that this is not a risk to the city. I just want to verify that these are the same.
And in the past, the 501c3s, there was something called bank qualification. And the reason the city hasn't seen a lot of these types, because you have a limit. If you issue over $10 million in any calendar year, they're not bank qualified. And so most of the time, by the time somebody was going to issue these types of bonds, they'd either go to Lincoln County or Minnehaha County because they hadn't issued any debt. and the city was already over their limit. So that's the reason the city has not seen these in the past. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act upped that limit to $30 million, and so you might see a little more before January 1st, or may not. Should I proceed with?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So these types of bonds would be qualified bonds, which means there's two types of bonds. There's governmental bonds where you borrow the money, use the proceeds for governmental purposes. You own the building, and you pay from it, usually with general revenues from either the water utility, sewer utility, sales tax, or if you do a GO vote, your general taxation. That's one type, and that's the general one that your credit rating is important, and that. The other is private activity bonds. That would be issued under 954. Those have a new type, which is, get back here, recovery zone bonds. You've already issued the recovery zone bonds under 1400U-2. That was your governmental type. I think it was sales tax bond and did the dike improvement. This is another type, but this is a qualified tax exempt bond, and it can be, the proceeds can be used for private activity, meaning more than 10% of the proceeds will be used directly to benefit a private individual differently than the public at large. And that's what you'll see on most of these. What is the process? The process, whether you issue 501c3 bonds or these types of bonds, is the same. First of all, you look at it and say to yourself, does this project qualify under 954? South Dakota has a broad requirements. The only one would be to do housing with a non-501c3 entity. Most everything else could fit underneath the 954. You give preliminary approval subject to a TEFRA hearing. You've heard it referred to as inducement resolution. This basically, the resolution usually states, we find this project qualifies. We direct the clerk to publish notice in the paper of a hearing at least 14 days prior to the hearing, and we invite the public through a notice of hearing to come and comment on this type of project. You have your hearing, and in the resolution you may even have a reimbursement, meaning if the borrower is starting to spend money, then through the bond proceeds we have an intent to reimburse to qualify. At the TEFRA hearing, obviously, everybody's given an opportunity to comment. After that hearing, or at the conclusion, the city can say, no, we're not going to do this, or we're going to proceed, and at that point you could pass a resolution authorizing the issuance of the bonds and directing the officials to take such action as is necessary to carry out the intent. I've answered the standard kind of questions which popped up before, but this is something that I think we'll see, especially with the current economic market, with the banks tightening. We'll see a lot more of these types of credit enhancement type situations. If a bank's looking at giving a loan to a private entity and it qualifies for one of these types of bonds, when the interest rate is lower, the loan payment's lower, and it makes it a little easier for the projects to cash flow. Another question? I'm done. If you have any other questions.
Any questions of Todd? Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, I guess since this isn't really used a lot around this area, what are the potential pitfalls or problems that could happen with this?
Let's see. What would the pitfalls be? I assume the worst pitfall is it would go into default. Off the top of my head, we had of the 501, these type of private activity defaults, we had a large one in Denver, the museum, or aquarium, I guess it was. The aquarium defaulted because they didn't have enough revenue. Usually if you have this type, the risk is taken mostly by whoever buys the bonds, because they're the ones that are going to do the underwriting. They're going to look at the borrower and say to themselves, can this borrower pay us back? Because the city's not pledging anything. They're just a conduit. So they'll underwrite it like a commercial loan. The worst case scenario is it would, if it goes into default, it would be at the, depends on how it, if it's a private deal, the city would probably be named as a party in a foreclosure action, but not ask any money from the city just because they're in the chain of title, so to speak, with regards to the note and the mortgage and the assignment. So it would be legal review and some of those types of things that the city now is probably listed on foreclosures where they have a lien or a special assessment. It'd be this similar type situation.
Okay. Thank you.
And so it wouldn't be zero, but it wouldn't be substantial.
Councilor Litz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Todd, when we did the Quality of Life 2 bond, as I recall it, we had to make an application or to get declared a recovery zone, and I know we were approved that time. Did we have to reapply for that, or did that act carry over to this business deal?
1400U-1 allocated down to the local level of government's recovery zone allocation. The thing that the city would have to do would be declare a recovery zone, which the city already has. They've declared the entire city a recovery zone. In addition to that, Minnehaha County declared the entire Minnehaha County a recovery zone. In addition to that, the South Dakota Building Authority, through the Board of Regents, has declared a portion of the City of Sioux Falls a recovery zone. So there are recovery zone studies out there that indicate that we're a recovery zone because we have a significant amount of increased foreclosure activity, sales tax decrease, general distress. Those factors are out there, and we've already actually designated. So that's off the table. The other thing is with regards to recovery zone economic development bonds, that's what you issued as a city. The city was allocated that amount, and they used it themselves. You're also, by federal law, allocated facility zone, and so is the state up to, what was it, 105 million or 50? I can't remember. 135 million, of which it's not all going to be used. So Jason Dilgis at the state has parts that have been waived by every county in the state of facility zone allocation. So there's a pool there for these type of projects. In addition, I believe you'll just be using your portion already allocated. So you would just make sure that you designate that on your ledger if you have a recovery zone volume cap ledger. So that's a requirement, which simply is done if you approve the bonds.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there anything else you need to add?
I don't think so. I think that takes care of it, and a majority of the other part, city attorney reviews.
You just want to let them know about the TEFRA hearing notice that will be coming out there.
I have drafted a resolution, which is the inducement resolution, that says we intend to proceed and have a hearing. And I'm not quite sure how to get that on your agenda or who posts it, but if that's something that the city would like to do, is to proceed, I can sure send that to the clerk. And
yeah, send it to the clerk, and we'll certainly vote on it later. We wouldn't vote on whether we want today.
No, it's not on the agenda today. So the only other thing I gave you this handout, and I'm not sure with the new rules, you want me to bring a couple extra that can be on file with the clerk and open to anybody's view?
It'll be on Granicus, I believe, and they can review it that way. So
super.
That's on SiouxFalls.org. Mike, do you have anything else you need to add, or Gene, or on this topic? How about counselors all have a good understanding of how that works? Is there would they like a layman's interpretation of that issue at all? All right, seeing none, we'll move on then to our next item on the discussion is our budget hearings. I think we're going to start off with Gene Roanhorse and with a budget overview.
Gene Roanhorse, Director of Finance for the City of Sioux Falls. I'm very pleased to be here today to begin the process of going through the detailed budget that was presented to you back on the 22nd. And we're looking forward to sharing with you the information that we have. I'd like to thank everybody that worked on this. The directors and the staff of the directors literally puts in thousands of hours to put this thing together. It's not done, not taken lightly, and it's analyzed to death, and I think they've turned out an incredibly good product that should give you a good sense of where the city is going from a financial standpoint. First thing we want to start to do is take a look-see at what we're going to do is go through this and explain to you. I'm going to do the part where we have our assumptions and all that kind of good stuff and talk with you about that. And basically, I'll take care of all of the revenue. Now, there'll be a little bit of revenue that the other directors will have to deal with because of the size and that, but basically I'll have the revenue piece of it. Then immediately following me, Bill O'Toole is going to do the staff. And the reason we do that is 70% of our cost is staff related. And Bill can work with the plans that we have for dealing with staff for the next year. And that way we don't start duplicating everybody's work. Should minimize then the amount of staff contact that you have and the amount of information that you'll need on the revenue side of it. So with that, first page, just to give you a sense of the tax. The tax-supported revenue is $181.9 and $182 million. This is in the general fund is part of it. The part that is driven by fees as opposed to taxes is about 43% of the budget. 57% of our budget is taxes, and our page here shows you where some of this money goes. The pink sheet shows you that how much is fee related, and that's basically our enterprise funds that all of you are familiar with. On the tax-supported side, you've got the general fund that collects about $44 million in property taxes. Then on the first penny of the sales tax, we got another $42 million. And of course, the second penny is identically the same because they're both the same calculations. And the entertainment tax fund, and then there are some other miscellaneous smaller sources of funds. One of the things we wanted to show you. Yes.
My brain just quickly adds up 44, 42, and 42, and 5. It doesn't come up with 181.
No. 133.
It doesn't. This list in here is not necessarily complete. This is the big providers of funds.
Okay, just so there's other providers of funds that make it up to 181.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm just trying to follow you here.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that was that probably what the clerk's office gets the difference.
No, that probably wouldn't happen.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
We had a good talk earlier today, my staff and I, that all of these numbers better tie back and forth. Okay. Well, we wanted to give you a little or a little sense of the two big functions again: operating expenditures and capital type expenditures. And it just lets you look through these boxes to give you a breakdown or a sense. Again, like I say, we have personnel services, and you'll hear us talk about 1,000 accounts. That's the personnel services. Other operating, that's everything but personnel. And you can see the list of things that show up in that area. Then in the capital type expenditures, we have the 3,000s, which are the traditional items that you might think of in capital. And then debt service is the 4,000s is the last item on there that takes up a good share of our funds. And that has a principal and interest and bond fees in it, and there might be some other miscellaneous items in there. But the message I'd like you to walk away with is the budget is complicated. These do get very complicated, and sometimes the confusion factor can be a little troublesome. To give you a sense, Rex, this will help you a little bit. We're in 2011 here. The $307 million is the total budget, and what you can see in the pie chart give you a sense of how much of that budget breaks down to each different area. Our other operating expenses are the largest number under this particular presentation of the numbers. But it includes all of the city spending for personnel, other operating capital, and debt. There's been an 8.9% decrease from 2010, the original budget in 2010, to the budget in this one that we're presenting to you today. And that is primarily due to we did not do any bonding, so those new things weren't out there, and that helped us bring it down. Another point that can be confusing times, our budget goes up and down with debt instruments, or their debt instruments are included in our budget. So you can see we actually had a budget somewhere around $480 million about 3 years ago when we did Lewis and Clark. And now we're down to 307 that we're talking about here. So it's a little different again to understand, but we just want to let you get a sense of that. What services does your money buy? Well, 40% of it goes to infrastructure and utility services. That's primarily your enterprise funds. Public safety is 16%. Culture and recreations, which is primarily parks and libraries, museums, things of that nature, culture and recreation. And you can see from the pie chart the big players. Enterprise funds are the biggest amount in here, and that again is not an appropriated fund, but it is in our budget, and our plan is put in place for it. Internal service funds, you may not hear that a lot, but that is things like the enterprise fund that all of our fleet goes through. A fleet fund actually owns most of the rolling stock in the city and rents that property back to the various departments. And it's a good way to do things from the standpoint that we can have different departments get a hold of different equipment and not have to have, like, for instance, one roller for one department and somebody else have another roller and have one of them sitting idle for a while. We can move them around much easier from department to department. And then you can see the rest of them. If there's any questions, we'll be happy to help you with them. Our 2011 capital program, the biggest part of our program is 62% is infrastructure. And that is things like roads, streets, water, sewer, things of that nature. And that capital program for this year, and actually you saw this earlier, you got the CIP book, that capital comes to a total of over $61 million that we're putting into the city this year. In 2011, our debt service is 33% of the debt service is for infrastructure. Well, it's just a little different cut on the same project, same set of numbers, but it's not that big when you go compared to the 61. You have the 29 million, actually almost $30 million that is into infrastructure, and that's what came out of the one earlier. Outstanding debt. Our infrastructure accounts for 77% of the total outstanding debt. So of the number that we saw, and I haven't got the total outstanding debt is $276 million. 77% of that is in infrastructure. So most of what we do is indeed capital services. We don't do things like borrow money for operations. We only borrow it for a solid piece of equipment or a building or an asset that we can usually glom onto. And, like I said, Lewis and Clark is in that category. Storm drainage improvements, that was about almost a $50 million project that resulted about 5 years ago now. What we're just going through today, it worked pretty well. If you see what's been done, we've not had any significant backup problems in an area where we took some action on against floodwaters. One of the things we could be most proud of, I think, as a city is debt management and how that's been handled. The Moody's has given us a rating of a AA2 bond. Now, this is a AA2 revenue bond, so it's not quite as good as a AA2 general obligation bond. But for a revenue bond to even exist like this is highly unusual. That we were that strong that they would still give us a AA2 rating, and it's you can see in the chart where it has AA2, the mid-range, where that's kind of where we're at. But it's very, very strong, and you can read the comment up at the top that Moody's put in their report when they gave us the AA2 rating. A question came up on debt management again, as responsible, that it is responsible. And what we did is we researched some of our cities primarily around the upper Midwest, and you can see that when you look at the debt situation for the city of Sioux Falls based on a per capita basis, Sioux Falls is at $1,772. We're the lowest we found in the area, and you can see where the others go up to. Fargo tops out at almost $4,300 per capita. So we used to have a lot of discussion that we were awash in debt. I would contend that we are not awash in debt by any measure. Now we'll take a look at the general fund and the financial position that we have there. The first chart that you see shows that we're a strong, vital city even in these economic times. What the chart shows you is the green line up. I'll back up. 25%, the white line. That's a goal that we have of keeping the percentage of our liquid assets in an account so that we don't run out of money. And the 25% is we would like to move right around that number. If you see this, we see what this one does. We're actually at 35% in 2009. We're projected to drop that down to around 33% in 2010. And then in 2011, which is the budget we're talking about, we're dropping that down to somewhere near just a little over 30%. And you can see we're getting closer to that white line. But as you follow it across, we never really do cross over it. But it would be acceptable in certain situations to go below that line. But in any case, you should always come up with an average over the years that would equal that 35 or that 25%. This is a time in space calculation. We do this at December 31st. That's what the 25% ties to, is December 31st. So what you'll see during the year is as our property taxes come in, they'll run off, and we got to live on what we get for a period of 6 months. Then we get our next shot of property taxes in, the next set of them, and we pop up again, and then go back down. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this chart, that it is a point-in-time calculation. But again, the plan, as you can see, right now, even though we are having some rocky roads along the way, we're still very strong in our funds. General fund sources. Where does the money come from? Primarily operating in the general fund. One of the things that you can look at here is we are a heavily tax-supported government, with 78% of our revenue coming from tax sources. That, since we're in the operating fund here, that is property taxes in here is about $44 million, and the sales and use tax is $42 million, and then everything else, things like the frontage tax, lodging tax, is about $5 million. Give you a sense of how much that one breaks down. One of the questions that seems to come up is what's intergovernmental. Intergovernmental is money that we're getting generally from another governmental source, but a lot of it is federal money that we get. But it's money that it comes in grant money coming from other governmental entities that we can take advantage of. Sales and use tax growth. We got pretty conservative, I think, this year, and it seems to be working pretty well at this point. For growth in 2010 and 2011, we're estimating that there will be no growth in the sales tax numbers themselves. It'll be flat. In 2012, what the plan calls for is a 2% growth rate, and then in 2013 through 2015 calls for a growth rate of 5%. We had a little bit of a confusion last week on the sales tax. The media got a hold of some numbers that were old, and it was said we were at a 6% growth rate. I think you remember we had a discussion about that at one of the council meetings. But the actual number came in, and we're now at 1.5%, and you should have gotten your tax statements for that also. So that 1.5%, as far as our planning using zero, looks pretty good. And as we get further into the year, of course, that number is going to get more and more stable. So we're thinking it's going to run pretty well, but it should be more around that 1% range. Property tax, there's no inflationary adjustment in it. If you know what we're talking about, the state has set a maximum amount that you can increase your tax numbers, and that is 3%. And that 3%, the last one we had here is for the budget. It was 2.6%. When you throw in the adjustment, though, down here for the consumer price index, it's zero. That's worth about somewhere in the area of $1.5 million, $1.6 million, $1.7 million revenue that we will not be getting. And we don't know, of course, what we'll do for the year after that, but based on the prior chart here, we've got 2 years of being at a zero basis. Other general fund revenue that we pick up, the intergovernmental, you can see there's a list of items. The bank franchise tax would be under intergovernmental because that comes to us through the county. That'd be about $1 million that we're looking at. Down under licenses, building permits and fees is one that raises about $2.3 million. Charges for goods and services, Primarily, that's health. I think that's around $10 or $12 million total, but 66% of that comes from health. Fines and forfeitures, court fees, that's another example of what's under that section. General fund expenditures, $117 million. What we really did this year is we took the difference where it says 2010 original, and we backed that down before the end of the year, and this was our holdback program. We backed that down from 116 million, or I'm sorry, from 122 million down to 116 million, and that's how we've got the funds. Looks like we're going to do okay in 2010. We should be in reasonably good shape, but that holdback program seems to have worked. And you have to give credit to the department managers for doing a lot of work to keep things under control so that we didn't shoot ourselves in the foot by letting the money get overrun by the budget. What services does your money buy? Primary operating in the general fund. 42% is public safety, and public safety is police and fire. So that is a very large part of the budget for the general fund. 16% goes to highways and streets, and 16% goes to culture and recreation. And the culture and recreation, again, is libraries, parks, arena. That's pretty much that particular item. You can see again that the biggest item on here is the highways and streets. It's 16%. Police is at 24%. I guess I had these mixed up. Police and fire, 24% and 18, and then 16% for highways and streets. So you can see that I think we're getting the money in the right place at this time. Other general fund expenditures, as we said earlier, 70% is personnel's expenses, and then another 26% is other operating expenses. These were reduced from our original budget, and then the holdback was reduced by another 3.9%. And you can read the chart down below how this all plays out. The point being, we took almost $10 million out of the budget this year. And that leads us to general government. Some of you may or may not have heard about general government. General government is a rather small part of the budget as a whole. That includes the budgets for the mayor, for the city council. This is where you're at with your money. The attorneys, human resources, you can see the items that are all there. That whole thing of general government, 4% makes up 4% of that account. With that, are there any questions?
Any questions of Gene yet? Councilor Brown.
Gene, I have a couple questions. First of all, I want to talk on the current year-to-date, the 1.5% increase we saw in the sales tax. Was there an early cutoff date on that? Do you know where that was cut off?
It appears there's a couple of days early. It's just really hard to tell again when they do that.
And then I had a question in going through on the revenue side. It appears that in the investment income, we're showing that we expect $3 million more in 2011 than 2010, and I wondered what was contributing to that.
I don't know. I'll have to get you an answer on that.
Okay. I believe it was about $24 million projected in 2011, which seemed odd to be $3 million more than in 2010.
Oh, pension trust. The pension trust came back up.
Okay. And then, special assessments, license permits, fines. We're starting to see building permits go up again, but yet those projections are down. Do you know why that is that way?
I don't know why it's that way. We just, it's a number that we follow and that we use to measure the quality of the economy in the city, but actually why and what's happening, I don't know if there's more spec stuff going on. I'd kind of doubt it.
I would doubt that, yeah.
But exactly why people are building and taking out building permits, I guess I don't know that.
And then on the reserves side, I believe that you're projecting to use $3.5 million to balance the operating budget, correct?
Yes.
Typically, I think last year when we did that, through attrition, there was money that went back into reserves. Are we projecting that again this year? I didn't see that.
No, we're not projecting it necessarily this year. Our plan is to be positive at the end of the year, but we've got to wait and see. Like, one of the things we've got to look at for 2010 is what's been happening for the last few days. That's not been cheap. Mm-hmm. Although a good share of that will be in the enterprise fund, so you won't see it from the general fund. But
so, are you looking at taking more than $3.5 million and attrition making it even at $3.5 million, or is it $3.5 million total out of reserves?
$3.5 million would come out if we hit our plan right on the head.
Okay.
That's what the number is to balance. I think it was the 117 and the 117. So you that's just to balance it. Now, if this weather or not that we've upsets the apple cart, then we'll have to see what we're doing.
So where does attrition figure into that, since typically department heads give back, I believe, about 5% in staffing?
They have in the past, but again, that's not a rule or anything like that, and it has been tightened down quite a little. You're right about the 5%, but we're looking at closer to 3%, maybe less.
So with that money, that attrition, that 3% go back into the reserves to lessen that $3.5 million?
It could. Whatever we come up with off a plan will go back in there.
Okay. And then what changed in the that curve in the 25% on December 31st, specifically in 2015? I remember that chart last year dipped below that. What has changed to make that stay above the 25% line?
What raise was it, Tom?
2010 budget. This has the updated 2010 budget.
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
It's got the updated 2010 budget in it.
Okay.
It's the holdbacks.
Okay.
And that set the line up above the 25%. Otherwise, you're right. If we hadn't used the holdbacks in that,
so the 2010
you would have been down under 25.
Okay. That's it for the moment, I think.
Councilor Intiman.
I must say that your projection in the sales tax, I think, is right on. I mean, it's zero growth for 2010 and 2011. All indications are in the retail markets that we have throughout the region that we're seeing flat sales for the first 6 months of this year. There's an awful lot of volatility in the retail markets out there. We're going to see lots of, over the next 12 to 18 months, a lot of the businesses I know we're projecting a lot of volatility, a lot of highs, a lot of lows. So I think that's a good philosophy to have on the sales tax collections for the coming year too.
We know a lot more than we did last year at this time.
Yeah.
Gene, if I could, a couple questions. Currently, I just want to make sure we're clear. The current sales tax growth for 2010 at this point is 1.5.
Right, year to date.
Year to date.
That's a year to date number.
Is there a reason you'd stay with 0 and not 1?
And not raise our budget
Right.
to 1.5?
Or 1, or somewhere in between that?
You probably could make a case for it. We're just more comfortable with it where it's at, because the probabilities, my own personal probabilities are that you're going to see the thing go lower rather than go higher.
Okay. And if at couple questions. If at the 1.5% stays true through the year, and that we ended out that way, what is going to happen with that money?
Well, that'll go back into the
Just in the reserve?
Yes.
And if we dip below the zero and we go into a decline, do you guys, does the department heads already have holdbacks essentially outlined, or?
For next year?
Yeah.
No. We don't carry anything over in the budget. Everything gets cut off at December 31st, and that's it. So whatever's there is there, so they can't carry anything over.
Well, maybe what I mean, and maybe you're answering the question correctly, but I just want to make sure I get it right. If 0% turns into -2, is there stuff that the department heads have already identified as items that they would need to cut and where they would cut? Do you do any of that planning now, or do you wait for another?
Get the number. We have not done that yet, any real planning on that yet, but that's why we're watching it. We'll give it another 30, 60 days, and then we'll be able to button it down pretty tight.
And 1% of this is what?
1% of 117 million.
Yeah, okay. 17. Councilor Brown.
A couple other trends that I noticed in looking through all the department budgets. I saw decreases in utilities, sometimes pretty drastically. How does that work?
I have not gone through the utilities as far as how that's done. We do a lot of that anymore with contracts, and I know we've done very well with at this point of doing it that way. We've saved quite a little money.
It seems odd that they would decrease that dramatically in some departments, but we can maybe cover that in some of the departments. And then also I saw decreases in job performance, which I believe is more training type of things. Is that correct? Was that a mandate to cut those?
Well, the mayor supported that kind of activity. You know, we in order to put this budget together for 2011, it's tough, and the mayor was directed some of them to be cut out of the program for this year, and I don't see an issue with that. This isn't going to be a permanent situation. It's just right now it's down on the bottom. We got to wait for it to come back up, and we'll get back to doing things that we should be doing.
Okay, anything else? All right, very good. Anything else to add, Gene? Otherwise, we'll move to Bill.
Not at this time, and Bill O'Toole will tell you all about staff.
Okay. Bill, we have a urgent request from several council members to take a little break, 5 minutes if we could. Thank you. We'll rejoin here at least 10 to 5. Okay, we'll recall the meeting to order. We're going to start with, or re-begin with Bill O'Toole. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. Bill O'Toole, Director of Human Resources. Before I launch into my presentation, just a couple of quick thank yous and nod to some folks that were helping behind the scenes. Just have to thank Tom and Gene and his team in finance. They've just been fantastic to work with as we put this together. And last but not least, Angie Youthie and Human Resources. Thanks to them and the work that they've done in preparation for this. I'd like to give just a real quick overview. This is going to be a real high-level review and overview. And at the end, I'd be happy to answer any questions. But real quickly, I want to talk about the organization, the staffing levels. We'll get to employees per 10,000 population, so we're looking at some benchmark information. We'll talk about the 5-year staffing plan that was included in the budget book. We'll look at those 2011 personnel costs and break those down for you. And we'll also break it down and take a look at it in terms of the general fund, the general operating fund for the city. And we'll also talk a bit about the benefits, particularly the city's pension, and what we're doing to plan for the future. The first thing I'd like to review just real quickly, organization by function and program. And you can see underneath the mayor the 7 areas general government, public safety, highways and streets, health, culture and rec, urban and economic development, and the enterprise funds and those programs underneath each of those. The next slide just talks about the staffing levels. Currently in 2011, there's 1,132 full-time equivalent positions. It's pretty much flat from 2010. And just some historical information for the council and those watching at home as well in terms of the history of the FTE staffing levels. Once you know those staffing levels, it's kind of one of those, what does that mean? How can that translate into some meaningful information? One of the things that we do in terms of benchmarking is looking at those FTEs in relation to population, per 10,000 population. As you can see from this slide, here in the City of Sioux Falls in 2010, we have 72 city employees per 10,000 population. And there again, benchmarking that, what does that mean, or how does that look in comparison to some of our peers? And we've got a good illustration here from left to right. You can see the City of Sioux Falls, second to the left, at 72, and how we stack up. This is just one look. This doesn't break down those other entities in terms of the kind of services they provide in relation to the City of Sioux Falls, but just kind of a quick benchmark. How do we compare to some of those other cities? I think it's just good background information. Next, I want to move on. On page 172 of the budget book is the actual staffing plan. It's page 172 and 173. This is just kind of a summary of that plan. And you'll note for 2011, there aren't any new positions being requested out of the general fund. But over the course of the next 5 years, we are planning for some growth in new positions, and there are 31 positions that are requested in the 5-year staffing plan. Now, how did we get there in terms of developing that staffing plan? When we put the staffing plan together, there were kind of three key indicators or drivers that we were looking at in formulating that staffing plan. The first one, and probably the biggest driver, obviously, is what is our revenue forecast going to look like? And what we've estimated, based on those forecast projections, is that the estimated amount of dollars available for new positions over the next 5 years would be about $2.4 million. So looking at that and looking at the priorities and the capital projects that we know are out there that we need to plan for and account for, obviously we know we have a new library coming in 2013. We have a new fire station coming in 2014. So we're planning for those. And another significant event that drove the development of the staffing plan was the 9 police officers that were funded in 2010 through the COPS grant. That was a 3-year grant, so we need to be prepared and start planning for assuming the general fund costs for those 9 positions as well. So, and we're doing that in the staffing plan. On the next slide, this
Bill,
kind of just
so the grant money that we received is for 3 years for those 9 officers, correct?
Right.
And that included, if I'm not mistaken, that also included the equipment that we needed to support those 9 officers, correct?
Yes, it did.
And so then at the end of the next 3-year time period, then in 2014, basically, I think it is, or 2015, we have to come up with the funding to pay those salaries and those kinds of things.
That's correct, and Doug can probably speak to this in more detail, but one of the requirements of the grant was that organizations who receive those dollars wouldn't supplant existing positions through the use of this grant, meaning the expectation was that you keep those positions on and fund it, I think is one of the conditions of that grant. So there again, there will be a point where that runs out, and we need to be prepared to fund for those positions. So from an accounting standpoint, we counted them in 2010, so to speak, but from a funding standpoint, that liability and that cost will be realized during the course of the next 5 years. Okay. And you'll see real quickly how we're going to get there in just a minute. Okay. But if we just eyeball, for example, the cost for the capital improvement projects that we know are coming down for us in 2013 and 2014, and the cost tied to the 9 police officers, and let me go back. For 2013 for the library, obviously there are 5 positions tied to that. That has an estimated cost of $300,000. There are 15 firefighters that are associated with the 2014 fire station, estimated cost of $900,000. And assuming the cost for the 9 police officers, it would be about $600,000. And between those 3 issues, you're at $1.8 million already. And you'll see in the plan there are 11 positions that were identified in 2015 to the cost of about $600,000, and you're at your 2.4 in terms of your estimated available revenue.
Does that
for new
include
positions.
benefits in this money? Does this money include the benefit costs or just the people costs?
Yeah, that's to compensate for everything that's
For everything,
there.
including benefits?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Bill, that would not include, though, in the police officers, the equipment.
Well, I think up front, the equipment and everything was identified with another kind of piece of that grant. I don't know if it
But
was
by
the
that
same
time, they're going to need the equipment, so we're going to...
There's possibility that additional equipment could go with those 9 officers, yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
So has that been identified in the police budget?
That might be a question for Chief Barthel.
Okay.
But for 2011, Ian, we're talking 2011,
Yeah.
the COPS grant runs through
I'm talking-
20, down the road.
I'm talking 15 or 14.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Councilor Brown.
Bill, we were forecasting with the COPS grant last year, but the staffing for police has changed dramatically from last year's staffing plan. Can you tell me what those numbers were again in last year's staffing plan under police?
You know, I don't have that information with me. This year, yes, there's obviously a revision in terms of what was there. 2010 fell off, which would have accounted for the 9 police officers. I suppose you could make an argument that those could have come on the rolls for the city when we started paying for them. We recorded them when they arrived at the city, even though they were being funded by federal dollars. So the 9 police officers were accounted, if you will, in 2010. And
Because I remember
what
the discussions were that would cover us in 2011, 2012, but we had numbers in for 13 and 14, which
Right,
are now 0.
Right, and I think we had to make some revisions based on the forecasts that we were then again making for the next 5-year plan. I mean, this is, again, I want to emphasize, it's a plan. It's going to change potentially every year depending on conditions, and you're going to see some movement in those 5-year plans.
So you don't have those numbers with you?
I don't have last year's staffing plan in front of me.
Okay, I'll find it. Thank you. Michelle has it.
If you go to the next slide. Again, just some more information behind the plan. Obviously, the current plan includes funding 31 new general fund positions over the next 5 years. And while we're dealing with 31 new positions, we're actually providing accounting or financing for 40 positions, because again, those COPS grant run out. We've got to account for those 9 police officers. And if you look at the estimated dollar allocation to public safety, in just dollars, $1.6 million, or 68% of the available general fund dollars for staffing is going to police and fire. So I do believe there's a significant priority being placed on public safety. And while the positions may look or appear light in terms of the next 5 years, the dedication towards funding positions is certainly present. The next slide, the pie chart on the left, you saw a little bit in Gene's presentation about this. The overall $300 million budget in terms of personnel services, personnel makes up about 34% of that budget. If we drill that down to the general fund budget, which is the primary operating budget where the wages and salaries are paid, $81.8 million, or 70% of the general fund is dedicated to personnel. Obviously a significant piece. And what I always like to remind people is, obviously as a government entity, our city employees are the ones that are carrying out the services and programs for the city, so it's logical that that would be a significant piece of that pie. The next slide, obviously we know that in 2011, 70% is being dedicated to personnel services. This is just a slide to give you a sense of history tied to that, so you can go back to 2002 and just get a sense what's occurred there, and you can see obviously a steady growth in that equation. The next slide again is, once we know that information, it's kind of, how does that compare? So we wanted to give you some benchmark information once again in terms of some of these other organizations, Fargo, Wichita, Cedar Rapids, Springfield, and Rapid City, how much of what they're paying is coming out of their primary fund. Again, just another benchmark. It doesn't tell the whole story, but it gives you something to say in relation to where we are. How are we comparing? So just some good information there as well. Again, on this next slide, we're kind of drilling down even further into the general fund personal services budget, and of that 70%, or $81 million, excuse me, what is the breakdown of those costs? And you can see there, wages and salaries accounting for 71% of the personnel costs for our 1,132 city employees, retirement at 16%, health and dental at 9%, and OISI and workers' comp at 4%. So there's a breakdown of all those costs. Moving on to a slightly different piece, if we talk about benefits, specifically pension costs, I think this council is aware the city operates 2 defined benefit pension plans in the city of Sioux Falls. And if you look at those costs, it's the line item 1301, pension and OPEB. There was a 1.5% increase, or about 13.6% increase in our costs. And for those of you who may not know, OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. So in addition to our pension liabilities, we have a health care component that our retirees are eligible for. So that also has a cost piece, and that combined rate is what we get. So when we look at the cost of providing that benefit, it's expressed in terms of a percentage of payroll. And that last point, the employees contribute a fixed percent, the general employees contribute 3%, police and fire contribute 8% of their pay, and the city's contribution rate is also expressed as a percentage of payroll, and that is derived from an annual actuarial valuation that we get each year from Gabriel Roeder Smith & Company, who is our actuary. And obviously you can see up here that the city's contribution rates are separated out by each of the respective divisions. So for example, in 2011, we know that for firefighters, the city's going to have to contribute 32.90% of payroll to fund pension and health liabilities for retirees. And in police, 28.44, and general, 18.06. And obviously that's a significant piece, and if you saw in the budget book in that 1301 category, just in the general fund, that's about a $13 million contribution. So that's a significant piece that I just wanted to at least touch on real briefly. Again, as we move forward and we're planning for the future, and obviously we have some strategic objectives that we'd like to accomplish. We want to become more efficient and more productive. I think the council has heard the mayor speak about, and Gene speak about wanting to get a new financial management software package. We're pursuing that. We're also going to be rolling out an employee suggestion program yet in 2010. We think it's important to even hear from the frontline employees on ideas and how we can maybe do things better. We're constantly going through organizational reviews, designs. You've seen some changes here recently as well. And when it makes sense to do so to become more efficient and productive, we're going to do that, and we'll continue to do that. And in the 2011 budget, obviously you saw some reductions in overtime wages. We took out a couple of big pieces. Obviously overtime at 32.9%, or a reduction of a little over $500,000. Just real quickly, kind of the top contributors that led to achieve that. Fire was reduced their overtime amount by $237,000. Police reduced 25%, or $225,000, and street reduced about 21.8%, or $102,000. So that pretty much encompasses most of that $500,000 reduction in overtime wages. Part-time wages reduction of a little over 20%, or about a little over $1 million. There again, the contributors there in terms of the book to save you some time. Parks reduced 15%, a little over that, $430,000. Street reduced 45.8%, or $278,000. Central services reduced 64%, or $112,000. Public health reduced 18%, or $81,000. And library reduced 26%, or about $78,000, to come up with $1 million. Another piece that we're looking at is, obviously, we were cognizant of our rising personnel costs. We've got objectives in place that we are pursuing. And I would like to just talk real quickly about what we're doing. Obviously, it's very important that we're looking at the growth of new positions in the city of Sioux Falls. We're looking at inflation on wages, and we're looking at our benefits, particularly our pension costs. And I want to just touch on each one of those real briefly. The first one, in terms of the growth of new positions, obviously, when we're putting our staffing plan together, we're very cognizant of costs of adding new positions at the city's payroll. As this council knows, we haven't increased, at least through the general fund, any new positions from 2010, 2011, and right now in terms of the planning process. There isn't any identified in 2012 either. Another piece that the mayor has put in place in terms of scrutinizing positions, any vacated position right now, we've instituted kind of a three-tier system or three-tier process whereby before a position is filled, it's reviewed by HR, it's looked at by finance, and the mayor's signing off before any position does get filled. So we're being very, very attentive to those costs. The next thing I want to talk about, again, in the inflation of wages is obviously a significant component. When you've got 70% of your costs in personnel, what we refer to as a cost of living adjustment, that can have significant impact, and we're very cognizant of that as we're looking at that moving forward. And the second bullet point, just an example, not saying this is what's happening, I'm just saying as an example, if there's a 1% COLA applied to the full-time wages in the general fund, just a 1% cost of living adjustment would be just over $500,000. So that's obviously very significant. We're very cognizant of that. And of course, this has relevance in terms of the labor contract talks. And I don't want to get any details there, but I've just put some information in there in terms of inflation on wages, and we've got issues in terms of bargaining, particularly this year for AFSCME and police. And there'll be more information to come as well. And lastly, a big piece, as I said before, the pension obligations are significant. On July 2nd, the mayor requested a meeting with the pension board chairs and basically sat down with them and asked them to help identify some objectives to control these rising pension costs. If you're not familiar and you haven't been with the city a great deal, 32% contribution rate is significant and it's substantial. And I think just to continue to look at that without looking at ways to address that isn't really very responsible. So we're taking a look at that. And on July 22nd, the pension boards held a planning session with the goal of being able to produce some proposals to alleviate those rising pension costs. And we're actually trying to get a target date of 2012 for implementing some measures to help deal with that. So we're looking at those. Obviously, we're very concerned and cognizant of it. And I guess with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any other questions for Bill? Councilor Brown.
Bill, you talked about, as an example, was it the 1% COLA increase?
Yes.
So is there a COLA increase figured in this budget for 2011?
No, there isn't a built-in COLA. Obviously, we still have to negotiate with those respective labor unions, but in terms of some of the other employee groups, there is not a COLA built into the budget.
And then what about promotions, the STEP program? Are there promotions figured in?
Yes, those are calculated into this budget.
And I believe the mayor had said in his budget address, he was personally, you talked about the vacant positions, but also I believe he said on promotions, did he mean step increases there? He's taking those personally and determining those?
Yeah, any vacancy, yes. If there's a vacated...
No, I'm talking promotions, the step increases.
No, we weren't looking specifically at that in terms of step increases or merit increases. And most of that is identified in ordinance, that if you have satisfactory performance, it's been 12 months or 24 months, depending on where you are in the step system, that still is being honored.
And then if we're cutting overtime, where will that money come from? For example, right now, I suspect that we have a lot of city employees probably putting in overtime as a result of the flooding. Where will that money come from next year, should we see an event that requires overtime?
Now, that's a good question, because obviously we're taking this down to a level that we're trying to keep it pretty thin and manage it in a way that actually, if there's a situation where you get a situation like that, it's an emergency, you'll try to manage that throughout the year, but maybe later in the year, if you have to come in for a supplement to ask that be covered, to cover those costs, that at least would be my opinion how that would be covered. I don't know if Gene would have any other comment about that, but If you've got those unforeseeable expenses, exceeds the appropriation authority, obviously that would require a supplement by the council to cover that.
My concern is that the budget be realistic. Are you comfortable with the overtime numbers that we're projecting for 2011?
Yes. I think if you look at, and be happy to talk to both Chief Barthel and Chief Hill in terms of how they arrived at those figures, particularly in fire. If you haven't heard from Chief Hill, what he has done is actually, there are some true efficiencies that are being realized there that result in this, as opposed to just coming in and cutting budgets for the sake of cutting budgets. That's not what's going on. And I think you'll hear from Barthel that he's done some of those things as well, but feel free to ask those folks specifically how that might have an impact for them. But I do think this is realistic.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Bill, could we go back to slide 38 about the pension cost? The city puts in between 32 and 18% of the payroll, depending on what kind of employee that person is.
Correct.
And then we're talking about the idea of revamping the pension system. Or are we considering revamping the agreements we have with existing retirees or existing employees in terms of what their pension benefits might be? Does that make sense?
I think I'm following you. Right now, what's happening is the board is studying various options. They're required to do actuarial evaluations on any kind of a change to determine what would be the impact of implementing that change. And then they can assess it and decide whether or not that's something they want to recommend to the mayor and the council in terms of something that they would pursue. And depending on what it is, if it would be something that would impact any existing employee, for example, that would also require a vote of the existing membership as well. And if the membership were to vote that down, well, then that would also be the end of that proposal as well. But obviously, these kind of costs, the revenue projections that we're seeing, if we don't alleviate some cost issues, I mean, and I think it's happened already before. I think it's fair to say that it's difficult to talk COLA when you're looking at these kind of contributions where the city is funding dollars that go in to fund benefits.
Exactly, and I think we all work as employees somewhere, and so I think that we understand that we have to strike that balance. But I think that what I'm hearing from citizens and from employees past and present is that they want to make sure that they continue to have that voice, and so that for me is the most important part of it, is that it's not going to come as this sledgehammer, that it really is going to be part of a conversation that is an ongoing practice with our employees and with their unions.
It is, and it's in terms of the unions, that's not a negotiable piece because it's in ordinance. But when I talk about the Board of Trustees, it's made up of employee representatives on that board, so their voice is being heard through those employee representatives.
Mm-hmm. And so then the other thing I would say then to taxpayers is we're all working on this balance, that it's not going to be something that we're seeing these are huge contributions, and not all of us are getting those in our own situations. So we really do need to strike that balance.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
To continue on that discussion, how does that work with employees that have already retired? If the pension system changes, I assume you draw the line in the sand with new employees that are hired, because those that are retired have already based their decisions off what the city promised?
Yes. Yeah, you very carefully look at those, and you look at the proposals. Are they simply prospective in application? You don't normally look at something where you retroactively make a change because those are promised benefits that were given to those folks.
Okay.
But it depends on the nature of the proposal that's being studied and what you're looking at. But there again, I think you're absolutely right. The idea behind the board and even the mayor, this is reasonable steps to help alleviate those rising pension costs. Nobody's interested in just kind of slashing benefits. It's going to be a very reasonable approach.
Thanks, Bill.
Can I have one more clarification on the COPS grant thing? I don't want to keep beating on it, but I'm not sure I understood. It was a 3-year grant, but when does it run out?
Well, and again, Doug can elaborate more. It could be it's a 3-year grant is what it was intended to do, but depending on the dollars are tracked with those officers that were hired tied to that grant, and it may run out.
It depends on when they were hired, right?
And it may run out longer. Okay. I mean, it's possible, but for us, and from a planning perspective, what we're doing is saying, well, let's realize half the cost one year, and we'll realize half the cost the next year, depending on how it actually washes out.
Right, exactly.
It
I just
depends.
wasn't tracking that. Thank you, Bill.
Yes.
Bill, one question or two. You gave us some benchmarks of other cities, that number of employees and the per capita and that kind of stuff. I did a little math. Did I do it right? I want to make sure I did it right. The average cost of a city employee, is it $71,554.77?
So did you just take the general fund?
Took the 81 million divided by 1,132 employees.
Now, if that's what your number came out to be.
That's my number,
That
but
would be
I-
an average number. I mean, again, that's everything, so you're going to have all employees in that mix. Again, that's the budgeted amount to cover the wages, the benefits.
Right, just like any business would do.
Right.
Now, maybe if you could help me and maybe the others, some of those other cities that you did benchmarks on, is there a way that you can determine that as well, average cost of an employee, to determine whether or not we're paying our guys a little more or a little less than the other cities?
Yes, I can have a staff person follow up with some of those same entities to see if they can't come up with something similar.
Would that be helpful? I noticed you broke down the cost of wages, and then you had another percentage for the cost of benefits. I don't know if we fall out of order with some other cities and what their benefit packages are, but that'd be something for us to help gauge ourselves.
One of the things that I can speak to, because the city did do a comprehensive wage and benefit study last year, and
Right.
just going from my memory of reading the report, what I can tell you is that our package was competitive in terms of the peers that were selected in that study. I can't remember the specific language, but we weren't leading the case, and we weren't behind. We were kind of slightly above the middle in terms of where we were. Big picture talk, Counselor.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for Bill? Bill, anything else? from
That's
you?
it.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to library. Museum, sorry. Library. I saw Sally back there.
Good afternoon. Bill Hoskins, Director of the Siouxland Heritage Museums. I wanted to just start out, I know we have a number of new council members, and to go over the Siouxland Heritage Museums were formed in 1974 through a joint cooperative agreement between the City of Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County. And we operate the Pettigrew Homan Museum and the Old Courthouse Museum. The museums are open daily. About 5,400 hours a year in both buildings. We are open every day, 7 days a week, except holidays. Our visitation was about 75,000 last year. That was up about 3.7%. That's the third year in a row that we've had 3% or greater growth in attendance or visitation. Currently, this year, after the first 6 months, we're up about 5%. Our staff as a whole, we did over 2,000 programs for over 38,000 people. The majority of those programs are in our school system. The Pettigrew Homan Museum was built in 1889. It's a little over 120 years old. It's been a city museum since 1930. The building was given by Richard Franklin Pettigrew, and the city he added the first edition, the city added a second edition in 1933. The building's on the National Register of Historic Places, and it's open daily. The Old Courthouse Museum, roughly the same age, actually built by the same architect. The county moved into it in 1890 through 1962. It opened as a city museum in 1974 after sitting empty for 12 years. It's also on the National Register and open daily. The museum's funding is not exactly straightforward. Under the joint cooperative agreement, there are three specific budgets that are provided for. An operations budget, which is funded jointly by the City of Sioux Falls and by Minnehaha County. Basically, the city and county are matching dollar for dollar to put into that operations budget. We have our maintenance budgets. The Pettigrew is owned by the City of Sioux Falls, and under the joint cooperative agreement, the city is to provide for the maintenance of that structure. The Minnehaha County owns the old courthouse museum and provides for its annual maintenance and upkeep. We also have, and so in our proposed budget for 2011, you'll see the city actually is going to be paying about 43% of our total budget, the county about 45%, and about 12% comes from some other funds. And I guess I've blown through what our government funding is, but basically all our budgets are administered by Minnehaha County. Some of our other funding includes the Museum Special Enterprise Fund. Now, this is a fund that accounts for revenues and expenses associated with rentals, sponsorships, and fees charged for some events and activities at the museum. We have the Museum Store Fund, which is also a revenue fund, which is used for the operation of the museum store. The museum's endowment, we have an endowment, and the current balance is around $800,000. That's operated by the Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation. The revenues that we receive from that, and they're very difficult to predict lately, get deposited into the enterprise fund. And that's a change. If you look at where our enterprise fund is this coming year in 2011, that's a change that brought about by the state auditor starting in 2010, so it's not reflected in the enterprise fund budget that was adopted for 2010, but these funds are now being deposited in the enterprise fund. In past years, the way the county has managed it, they were put in a grants account. So you're going to see a significant increase in the revenue into the enterprise fund, and that's one of the places it's coming from. And there'll be associated expenses, but that's all being handled in the enterprise fund. All of these, the funds are being managed by Minnehaha County under the joint cooperative agreement. What we're looking at in 2011 for funding in the museum is an operations budget, which is a total of $1,153,047. The Pettigrew maintenance budget of $31,175. The Old Courthouse Museum maintenance budget of $68,200. The enterprise fund $135,175, and the store budget of $27,928. Now, the maintenance budgets are fairly isolated. They're used specifically for the maintenance of the Pettigrew or the maintenance of the old courthouse. We can't use operational budgets for the maintenance of those buildings, even if we have need. What we have done in the past in some emergency situations is we've used enterprise fund revenues to address some of our pressing issues in the maintenance budgets of different buildings. Where you'll see the most interaction between budgets is actually the Museum Special Enterprise Fund and our operations budget. And there's actually some staff salaries or monies that are budgeted in the enterprise fund that will show up as a credit under our human resources in the operations budget. So there are some, well, anyway, there is interaction between those different budgets. Basically, if you look at our budgets as a whole, human resources accounts for 72% of our budget expenses. The maintenance budgets for the building, the upkeep is about 7%, and those operational expenses for developing exhibits, providing educational programs, buying paper, copier maintenance, telephone, are all about 21% of our total expenditures. What of this are we really asking for in terms of support from the City of Sioux Falls? We're asking for a total of $592,699. This is a little bit less than what the mayor's recommended was, which I think it's in as $594,000. And part of the reason for that is I go down the budget road guessing every year, and because I'm very much involved in the county budget process as the county administers our funds, I really don't know what the final number is until the county adopts their provisional budget, which they did last Tuesday, and I got these figures on Thursday. So we're pretty close, but a little below what the mayor's recommended budget was. I know I'm charging ahead pretty quickly. We do have a joint budget hearing between the City Council, the Mayor, and the Minnehaha County Commission. There are 3 budgets that are under consideration in that joint budget hearing: the museum's operations budget, the budget for the Museum Enterprise Fund, and the museum store need to be adopted or have in the past been adopted in that joint budget hearing. The budget resolutions for the council and the commission usually need to be matching resolutions for the adoption of that budget, and that will be on August 16th. All of that said, I have a lot of budget detail. I'm not sure what members of the council are really interested in, so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Councilor Erpenbach?
Thanks for the presentation, Bill. First question is, tell me how much it cost me to buy a ticket to get into either one of these museums.
The admission to both museums is free.
It doesn't cost me anything to go into any of these museums?
No.
Then tell me, is there a Friends of the Museum organization that does any kind of fundraising? Can I join a group that, or is there something like that going on out there?
Yes, we have the Museum Special the Siouxland Heritage Museums Alliance is a 501c3 Friends group. Annual membership's about $20. They are also making contributions, their cash contributions. They do support some projects in our budget. That's all going to be run through the Museum Special Enterprise Fund now. They also support our volunteer program directly. We have already this year over 100 volunteers who have given time to the museums, and the Alliance helps support that volunteer program. Also, as an Alliance member, there are some programs for which we do charge a fee, and Alliance members get discounted tickets or advanced ticket sales on those.
Councilor Intiman? I'm sorry.
Bill, looking forward to the future. I attended a joint county-city meeting, and we talked about the archives facility that we have. Are you currently, are you setting aside any funds for the future funding of this at this point in time, or are we still in the planning process for this facility?
Well, for a number of years, through the museum's endowment, the museum board has appropriated monies that have been set aside to help pay for design development and work on that building. At this point, there are very limited funds that have actually been set aside or identified for that project in particular. I believe last September, the City Council generously voted to include $500,000 for the project in the city's CIP for 2014. The only funds at this point that the county has put into it They put $25,000 in 2010 as a match of $25,000 that came from the museum's endowment for building design development.
Do you plan on, in the near future, with the planning process that you have, looking forward to that archives building, are you going to come up with a timeline so we can better get a handle on what expectations are or what we're going to need in the future?
Absolutely. And one of the big challenges is working with multiple governments. And the county commission and different commissioners have different ideas than I have, and trying to get that together. But that is something that we are doing, and it's going to be presented initially to the museum's board at our next board meeting, and then will be coming forth to the government bodies.
Councilor Brown?
Bill, can you help us? A couple of questions. Is it included in the current CIP, and in what year? The city CIP?
I believe it's in the city CIP in 2014.
I just did a quick glance and couldn't find it.
It may be under the library's budget. Oh, it's in Public Works.
Oh, it's in Public Works. Okay, thank you, Sally. And then, and it's sort of tagging on, maybe this is what Jim was getting at, but have you begun to look at what the operational costs of that will be? Because in the city process, we always put that in the CIP, and I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah, we are. We're really looking at several different components. Depending on who, if you look at the joint cooperative agreement, right now the Pettigrew's maintenance budget, which includes natural gas, electricity, janitorial supplies, the alarm contracts, service contracts for elevator, things like that. Those are very specifically tied to the ownership of the structure. Although it probably hasn't really been determined yet, the property, the site, belongs to Minnehaha County. I'm assuming, maybe wrongly, but that Minnehaha County will probably own the structure built on their land. And so I would assume the annual maintenance budget for that structure would be something that would end up in Minnehaha County's purview. Where you'd see a real change is there would be some additional costs in our operations budget that would be shared equally between the city and county. And exactly what those are, I think they're fairly nominal. I think they're in the neighborhood, our estimates right now, of about $56,000 a year, which would be about $23,000 for the city. Some of the things that we don't totally have a handle on yet, we just got some numbers on utilities, projected utility costs, and those are things that change, it seems, daily. But we're also looking at some of the startup costs that would be associated with buying new shelving, and some of our numbers and the architect's numbers, and we want to make sure that the numbers that are in the architect's construction estimate are not duplicated in our numbers, and that's where we're at right now. And again, I'm hoping to get that nailed down fairly soon.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Just to clarify it, I did find it in our CIP book. It was an amendment that the council made last year based on a motion from Councilor Staggers, and it's in the 2014 line item. It's $475,000, which is a minor portion of the overall construction costs of, remind me, Bill, how many millions are we talking? 2, 3, 4?
The current estimate's about $5.6 million total construction cost, and that would probably be split equally between the city and county, although there is the possible option of the 25 acres originally donated. The deed allows for 5 acres to be retained and up to 20 acres to be sold. The proceeds of that sale to go towards the construction of the building. And so exactly what would happen with that would have to be worked out between the city and the county.
Right, exactly. And we've already taken some of that payment from the county in the form of soils that were moved off of that site and used on the junior football fields. There are all kinds of things happening with that arrangement already. so that it can move forward when we get to the point where we have this line item in our budget. The other thing that we need to talk about then is our own, if we as a city own the Pettigrew home, it's one of our assets, and it's filled to the gills with storage, as is the county's building, the old courthouse museum, also filled to the gills with storage, that this building starts to become more and more critical in terms of our care for our long-term assets, that we need to move those storage items into a safe facility and keep them from literally destroying the historic buildings that we own.
Any other questions for Bill? Councilor Raum.
Probably not for Bill, maybe, I don't know if Gene's here, but Tom, maybe a request for in future budget years to get the museums on the performance indicators as well, to help him tell the story and the goals of where the museum system is going. And since you're kind of quasi-county, quasi-city, you probably haven't been acclimated to that, Bill, but maybe finance could help do that.
Okay. Well, if any of you have questions between now and the joint hearing or want any additional information, if you just let me know, or let Deb know, and we talk, and Deborah Owen, and we'd be happy to get the information to you.
Thank you, Bill. Next, we'll move on to library with Sally Felix. Sally?
Good evening. Put this over here. Okay, just go through here, and I talk fast too, so if I'm going too fast and someone wants to ask a question, please feel free. Our portion in the book starts on page 61. Probably everyone knows, but just to remind folks and those who might be listening or viewing this later, we do have a main library, which of course is downtown Sioux Falls. 11 branches, 3 of those are in the City of Sioux Falls, and 5 are out in the rural areas of Minnehaha County. We have updated our population. We serve all of the City of Sioux Falls and all of Minnehaha County, with the exception of the City of Del Rapids. They chose a number of years ago to fund their own library, so they are not part of our library system. But we are now up to over 192,000 people in that service area with our recent increase in population in Sioux Falls. We have about 103,000 registered borrowers and about 329,000, we call them library holdings, that's books and other library materials. Looking at 2010, I think everybody probably knows, we opened the main library, yay. May 7th this year, after 2 years of construction and many, many years in planning. I'll say a little bit about use in just a minute there. We also did a renovation of the Crooks Branch Library, which was funded through the county's capital campaign. I wanted to mention that here because that really was quite a transformation. If you're ever out in Crooks, the library looks very much like it always did from the outside, but boy, you go inside, it is a total transformation. So we consider that to be one of our major accomplishments this year as well. We are also in the process of purchasing a new bookmobile that is jointly funded by the county and the city. Our current bookmobile is 15 years old, got well over 100,000 miles on it. It's one of the big old-fashioned kinds of bookmobiles, very expensive to run, a maintenance money pit at this point. So we are actually downsizing a bit with our new bookmobile. I have a picture of what it potentially will look like at the very end. But we are really focusing the service on the bookmobile toward kids. Bookmobile service has been changing over the years, and people's lives have changed, and people aren't home during the day anymore, and most people, certainly not everyone, but many people have transportation that's readily available to them to get to a library. So we really have focused the bookmobile on children, and you'll get that sense when we look at that end picture. Increased use. I don't want to bore you with a lot of statistics. They make us librarians real happy, or sad sometimes, too. These are happy ones. But just to give you some sense of the use at the main library, and I know I've talked a little bit about this before, but we are almost open now 3 months, and it actually is about 12 weeks. And in that period of time, we've had 186,000 people, actually a little more than 186,000 people go through the doors. We've circulated almost 131,000 items. And just on a side note to that, in June, we actually circulated, and when I say circulated, that means that, people actually borrowed library materials that, they took out of the doors with them. We circulated almost 50,000 items out of the main library, and I thought 50,000, well, it was 49,800 something. And I went back and looked at our statistics as far back as we kept them by month. We have them by year for probably forever. But I only could find them as far back by month and by location as 2000. And we circulated this June more than we did back in 2000. So it was back sometimes in the 1990s probably, when we actually circulated as much at the main library during the month of June. And I say that because, our use at the main library had been going down, but it really has turned around and is definitely, in the right direction. And I might also say that that number represents just 1,400 items less than we circulated out of the Cayley Branch Library in June. So we were, you always go, it's working. So we're very pleased with that. We've also had about 25,000 computer uses in that time, and over 4,000 people in the library for library programs. Most of those kids, but we've also done some adult programs, which have actually been better attended than I thought they might have. Looking at the budget for 11, I talked with you already some about the capital budget. Obviously, that has decreased quite a bit because those bond funds, Gene mentioned that when he was talking about giving us the overall finance. The bond funds for the West Side Branch Library were budgeted for and appropriated in 10, so they do not show up again in the budget. We certainly have the money, and we will be spending it. And you can see, just as the overall city budget is, and Bill Hoskins has mentioned the same thing in the museum's budget, we're heavily personnel. So we follow right along there. Let's see. I will point out, I'm always fond of pointing this out. Finance gets really tired of hearing me, but when Bill was just talking about the city's share of the cost of Siouxland Heritage Museums for the operations and also the maintenance on the Pettigrew, that does show up in the library budget. So when you see that $6.6 million, $594,000 of that is actually budgeted for the museum. Library Capital Program, again, just to briefly touch on this, to remind you, we're doing 2 HVAC upgrades at the Ronning and Cayley branches. The rest of our capital budget is for books and AV items, and also for some shelving that we're going to actually be putting in out at the Baltic branch. And you can see there again, it points out about the West Side branch being funded and appropriated in 10, and our timeline is to open that in 2013, and Bill, of course, talked about the personnel needs related to that. When we looked at our operating budget, and we've had a lot of discussion tonight, about the flat budget and the approach that we are taking, we obviously had to make some decisions about how we were going to allocate these funds. What you see on the left there, those are our priorities. Circulation or borrowing, it's the number one thing that public libraries do, no matter where you are. That's our number one priority. Providing public computer access is also very, very important. I've talked with you before about how that's become a core service of public libraries. Children's Services, that's been around since the first public library was opened in New Hampshire in whatever year that was. And then taking care of basic facility needs. And there I'm talking about paying the utility bills, keeping them clean, doing some non-routine maintenance, doing some exterior work on sidewalks and parking lots and that kind of thing. We really took a very critical look at our use of staff, and we have applied, or we are in the process of applying what our finance folks have called a greater managerial role in scheduling, and that particularly relates to our part-time staffing. When Bill went through the reductions in the part-time staffing for all of the city departments, he mentioned the library, and ours is significantly less. And there's actually a couple of reasons for that. One is that we had planned for some significant increases in the wage rates for our part-time staff in 2010. So we had budgeted for that, way back in 2009. That did not happen. That was part of our holdbacks. So we, in essence, had budgeted for more than, we knew we didn't know it at the time, but then we ended up actually, spending, because we did not do that. We did not give COLAs to the part-time staff. The full-time staff did not get COLAs, and we did not give COLAs to the part-time staff. So that's a fair chunk of that. We also, kind of just to explain a little bit about how we use part-time, we do have a group of what we would call permanent part-time staff that run our small branches out in the county. And some of those folks have been with us for quite a long time, and in fact, they worked for the county prior to when the merger took place in 1995. So we do have a certain core group of part-time people that, that are more permanent part-time, but they are not part of our complement for the city. And so we know we have those folks, and we know pretty much what hours they have to work. We also use our part-time staff to help cover all of our hours. Our city branches are open 63 hours a week for 9 months of the year. Our main library is open 69 hours a week for 9 months of the year. The Brandon Library is open 54 weeks, and then the smaller branch libraries go down from there. So we do need some people to help cover those hours. We also use part-time people when we have sick leave, vacation leave, maternity leave. We've got mostly women on our staff, and we have a number of young women who are starting families. And so they, are often out for a fairly long block of time. So we're never really sure how much part-time we're going to need. And so to be honest with you, as the mayor likes to say, to be open, I think in past we probably have budgeted on the high side of what we've actually used in our part-time budget. We always turned money back in that budget, and I tended to look at it more a bigger picture level. But this year we really drilled down, and we have really spent a lot of time evaluating the part-time and where we really need it and how much we need, and it has resulted in the need actually in 2011 for less dollars. We also have looked at changing some of the allocation of time in our full-time staff. We've also looked at processes and procedures, and we have a lot of processes and procedures in library land. And in one of our areas in particular, we made some very significant changes in some of those processes and procedures. We eliminated some things, we shortened other things, and so therefore we were able to save some of that part-time staffing. So I know it's kind of a long, complicated issue, but part-time staff for us is kind of complicated. And as I said, it's a number of different things that have resulted in our having such a reduced amount of part-time staff next year. Let's see. Okay, Tim, we can go on to then wherever we are in the next one. These are our updates to our outcome indicators. We are looking at pretty much maintaining things the way they are. Just to tell you again, or perhaps some of you probably have not heard it at all, turnover rate of library materials is a measure of activity of collection. It's a measure of whether what we're buying and placing on the shelves is what people really want to borrow. And it's a good number for us because an active collection, a used collection, is very important for us in meeting our goals. Those are pretty good turnover rates for a library our size, and so I'm hoping we can increase that slightly next year. Title and browsing fill rates, we do surveys every year, and we ask the customers who come in the libraries, did you find what you were looking for? If you were looking for a John Grisham book, did you find it? Or if you were looking for a book on a particular subject, did you find it? If you were just looking for something good to read or something good to view or something good to listen to, did you find it? We just did those surveys for this year in June, and so the 2010 numbers are actual numbers, and we're hoping to be able to maintain that next year. Per capita circulation, again, our service area divided by the number of materials that we circulate. And, you know, we could do better, but those are very respectable numbers. And a couple more, and we're almost done here. We, of course, I talk a lot about computer use, and we really have increased the use of our online and downloadable library materials. Those are particularly downloadable audiobooks and ebooks, which you can get to through our website. Actually, in 2010, we were conservative, said that we thought we would increase the use of those 50%. It's well over 100% year to date. So I think we're going to actually, at the end of 2010, I think we'll do better at that increase. And I was a little more conservative for next year, too, but it probably actually could be a little bit higher. We also want to maintain the same level of computers that we have currently. We added quite a few as a result of the main library project this year, so we want to maintain those. We will continue to provide programs for children and teens. One of the changes in our budget next year is that we're not looking at having funds to bring in special programs in the summertime. This does not mean that we're not going to have a summer reading club program. We will have a summer reading club program. Our youth services staff and the staffs in the branch libraries do most of the programming anyway, but we do expect something of a reduction in the amount of kids, particularly because those programs are big draws, but we still will have very respectable attendances. Our adult programs, it's the same kind of thing with that, and that's very fledgling at this point, at any rate. And there you see the bookmobile. Now, those aren't the graphics we're going to have. That's just we're actually looking for local talent to take pictures, but we do want to make it very clear that this is aimed at kids. You can see, don't ask me, it's a Ford truck, and I don't know the dimensions and so forth of the rest of it, but it is considerably smaller. If you've ever seen our existing bookmobile, it's quite long, and it's a bus. It actually, because that's what many bookmobiles are, is they're regular school buses, and they're retrofitted for bookmobiles. And you see a nice picture of our reading room at the main library. Online services I talked a bit about. Library networking, just a bit about that, because we do have connections with other libraries. We have agreements, we call them reciprocal borrowing agreements, with Augustana and USF and the local higher education institutions, where our customers in good standing can go there and use their collections and borrow from them, and vice versa. So that extends the range of materials that, not many of our customers do that, but some do, if they have particular needs. And we also have good old interlibrary loan, which means that, we can try to borrow for people from another library if there's an item that they would like that we don't have. And we're tied into a national network for that. Actually, it's international at this point, but I don't know that we've ever gotten anything internationally, but we certainly have nationally. And that's the end of my story.
Any questions for Sally? Yes, Councilor Aguilar.
On your outcome indicators, so is 2009 the actual then, and 2010 and 11 would be your goals?
That is correct, with the exception of the title and browsing fill rates. 10 is an actual number because we just did those surveys in June.
Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. On that same page, it's page 66 of our book, I'm looking at the outcome indicators. And I'm also looking at the statistics on page 67 where it says the population is up, the card holders are up, the items borrowed are up, the turnover rate is up, the computer use is up, and the number of visits is up. And then we look at the targets for things like the tutoring program and providing programs for children and teens, and our targets are actually down. Can you talk about that a little bit?
We had to make some decisions about our budget, and they were very difficult decisions to do. And we feel that we can still provide a very strong children's program services, but without doing the special programs that we do in the summertime that we actually contract for and pay for outside performers to come in and do. It's part of what we just needed to do to make our budget work.
There's a summer reading tutoring program that the targets, their actual number of kids using it in 2009 was 130 children, and then the target for 2010 was 142 children to use it, and now it's being cut by 100%.
We actually put that program on our holdback for 2010, which again, I didn't like to do, but we had to make difficult decisions. And Jim Oliver went out and found money, grant monies to do that program, so we actually are doing that program this summer. And I didn't think to ask how many kids are in it, but I know that it is we're doing it both at Maine and at Oakview. My hope is that Jim can come through again next year with grant funds for that as well.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Sally, over the last couple of years, the full-time salaries have increased more than $100,000. This year, they're down 2.4%. What is the impact on the customer in 2011 by cutting that?
There's a number of issues that are involved in that, and the biggest one being the COLAs. And you did talk a little bit with Bill about that, but when you look at the 2010 original budget, that did have COLAs built into it, and so 11 does not at this point. So we are maintaining our 62 full-time it's not equivalent, it's 62 full-time authorized positions with the city. So I really don't think that we're going to be seeing significant reductions in direct service as a result of that small decrease in that.
You and I have talked through the years about deferred maintenance. Your repair and maintenance budget was reduced by 57%.
Yes.
A new bookmobile will probably help that maintenance program.
It will.
But what gives there?
Let me get my sheet out so I make sure I don't miss anything. We, and you, Councilor Brown, you did hit upon the bookmobile and also a courier van. We are going to be purchasing a new courier van this year, which was a holdback from 2009. But I think we're able to do it this year. Courier van is what moves all the library materials around among all of the branch libraries in the main library. Both of those vehicles were, getting very old and did have a drain, certainly on maintenance. So there's 2 new vehicles that, the maintenance, of course, will be greatly less. It'll just be routine. We also are looking at some of our circulation equipment. Not to bore you with all the details, but we have a variety of things, pieces of equipment that we use in our circulation function that sensitizes materials and desensitizes them, and we have the security gates, and we used to pay maintenance contracts on all of those things, and we have gradually changed that over the years. I do keep a pot of money in there lest something go wrong with it, so that we would have money to get it repaired. We have looked at the maintenance that we've paid or maintenance calls we've had to have on the equipment, and it really doesn't require, having as much money as we had in there. We still do have maintenance agreements on one particular type of that equipment because it does can be flaky. We have deferred some non-routine maintenance at the branches, particularly Cayley, new carpeting, painting, some furniture. Well, the furniture, I think, is in the supplies and materials, so that is a deferment. We have just generally reduced, again, some pots of money for HVAC repairs, general building repairs. I mean, we don't know what they are. We just know we're going to have something in the year. We've pared that down a little bit. We've also reduced the money that we had allocated for sidewalk and parking lot repairs. We still have some, but we just reduced that. And then also for some landscaping. We're kind of involved in this multi-year landscaping project out at Oakview. We'll still be able to do some of it, but not all that we, would like to do.
Are you, and especially with the Cayley branch, given how overrun that is, are you concerned about delaying that maintenance?
I'm always concerned about delaying maintenance because it catches up with you sooner or later. But again, it's another one of those difficult decisions.
And then finally, and I forget the number, it seems like when we were talking in the OSEP budget, the CIP, that it was a reduction in materials by about 12.5%.
I think it's 11. It's about 12%, yes.
So I'm wondering, if we're reducing the materials for the library, how will you maintain that title and browsing fill rate goal that is not going up, even though we're seeing increased usage of the libraries?
Well, we've reduced our materials budget this year. That was part, of our holdbacks as well. And we did okay, on our survey results. So, I mean, it's a best guess. I mean, I can't stand up here and promise 100% we're going to do that. I'm hopeful, that we will be able to. I don't have a guarantee that we will.
Okay. Thanks, Sally.
Councilor Erpenbach?
Sally, a couple other things. One, remind us again about the OSEP piece with the books.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that, if we look on page 64, we look at books and AV items you're going to buy in 2011, $298,000 worth. How much of that is coming out of the quality of life bond from the main library?
Okay, we're looking, I'm sorry, what page are you looking
Page
at?
64, books and AV items under expenditures.
Oh, right, okay.
Go over to 2011, $298,000. Is all of that from the quality of life bond?
What you see on page, if you look at page 65, where you see that none of that is from quality of life bonds.
Okay.
Okay, it's from sales tax money, and then also we're using some of the county appropriation in the capital budget for library materials as well. So that is, the combination of those two. But we are planning to use main bond funds. It's about $280-some thousand, if I recall, and I have that here somewhere.
Yeah, I know I do too.
Yeah, $281,540 in main bond funds. Those are monies that were previously appropriated, so they don't actually show up
in
in
line
here.
items, but we're going to spend them
But
anyway.
we will be allocating that to materials.
Okay.
Yes. So it's a little more than we actually had this year when you look at the holdbacks.
Then one other question, and I asked Bill the same question. Do we have a Friends of the Library
We do not.
program?
We do not.
Do we have a plan for anything like that, so we do some development sorts of things?
I know that in years past, we've talked about it. The idea of a library foundation was another, because, a lot of times foundations can be a fundraising arm, so to speak, for libraries. It's something that every now and then, we do talk about with the library board. We're always open to it and interested in it. It's not a simple thing to do, of course. It takes some time and thought and effort, but, we're certainly open to that.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Rolfing. At a recent listening and learning session, we talked a little bit about that book drop down at the main library, new main library. Has anything been looked at?
Yes, we've looked at it. We had the engineers and the traffic folks evaluate if indeed there were any way to place a drive-up book drop at the main library, which was what was the issue that was brought up at the Whisk and Chop session. There is no way to incorporate it into the building. It's just safety-wise would not work, the way the traffic flow goes. We could possibly do a stand-alone book drop. Again, that's kind of a safety issue, but not as bad. We might be able to make it work. We would lose a couple parking spaces, and that wouldn't be the end of the world on the north side of the building. The issues with the standalone drive-up book drops is it's a staffing issue because with the amount of materials that would be dropped off, we would have to go out frequently and empty it. People are not, they kind of shut their eyes sometimes when they come to a book drop and it's obviously full. They really don't, oh, well, I need to get out and go in. They will oftentimes just let things, out in the elements, so to speak. We worry about vandalism as well. You can have that with an in-building one too, but the areas in which the books and library materials go is somewhat protected. Not totally protected, but somewhat protected against that. So it's not an ideal situation. We do have at the main library, and we did look at this when we did the design of it, and because we know people really like this. It is a good thing to have, and our branches have it. But we did the best we thought we could do at the time, and that was we do have an outside book drop that is to the left of the main doors. And granted, you have to drive your car up and get out, but we also have an unmetered parking space immediately to the left of the front that has a sign up that says it's 2-minute parking for book drop-off. And I know we do have a lot of people that utilize that.
Councilor Brown?
Sally, I just need a clarification on page 64 in the CIP budget. The books and AV system, it shows almost 53% cut in books and AV, but I'm assuming then the $280,000 that you talked about from the quality of life bonds, that would bring that up to just an 11 or 12% cut.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Sally? Sally, anything else you need to add?
No.
All right, well, you're off the hook.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sally.
Next, Mike Cooper with Planning and Building Services.
I was waiting for a motion to postpone, but I could just see it in your eyes.
From this side,
You'd rather
though.
talk about RV parking.
From this side, Mike, though,
Okay.
we said those that are scheduled after 6 o'clock are required to bring treats.
I didn't get that email.
Or keep it short.
Well, good afternoon, evening, joining me tonight is Jeff Schmidt. Jeff is one of our key staff persons, along with Ron Bell, that helps with the budget process throughout the year. And so I also have some of the slides that we'll go through here relatively quickly. Starting out with our overview from last year, and just as a little bit more of an introduction, for those of you that are not familiar, the Planning and Building Services Department is made up of 3 different divisions: Planning Division, Zoning Enforcement Division, and Building Services Division. And our primary responsibility within our department is to manage the orderly development of Sioux Falls, and also to oversee the protection of property, along with ensuring public safety in the building construction and maintenance areas. Last year, some summaries, we dealt with 70 different types of requests for plan review, reports, annexations, rezonings, different types of applications that would go to Planning Commission and/or City Council, which could include conditional use permits as well as preliminary plans. Over 6,300 different building permits were approved last year, and just under $300 million in construction valuation. One other statistic that I think is important to remember is that we did about 43,000 different types of building inspections last year. Our peak number about 2 or 3 years ago was around 50,000, but last year it was about 43,000 total inspections. This year, as we look at our accomplishments in July, one of the things that we're proud of is that we recently were notified by an organization called the Insurance Services Office Incorporated, which is a nationwide organization that tracks throughout the country municipalities, looks at building codes, building inspection and enforcement, and then rates the municipalities on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the best and 10 being the worst. And that rating is forwarded to different insurance companies, which can potentially have an impact on property owners' insurance rates. And this year we were notified that the ISO's code effectiveness grading changed for Sioux Falls. For commercial properties, it went from a 5 up to a 3, and for residential, it went up from a 4 to a 3. And so that was a good news, and to go to a 2 is going to be even more challenging, but we're fortunate that as they looked at our Building Services Division, that was a real positive for the community. Also, earlier this year, in working with the City Council, as well as a number of different organizations in the community, we updated 6 different codes. This is a 3-year cycle that we typically go through of international code amendments. And again, thanks to the City Council, your support of going through that change. Currently, we're working on a very comprehensive revision to the zoning ordinance. Although we have amended the zoning ordinance throughout the years, since the early 1980s, we haven't taken on a major comprehensive revision. And so that's currently in progress, and Jeff is going to have a major role in accomplishing that. We're also currently working on a new update of our long-range transportation plan to the year 2035, and that's also a work in progress that I think is going to help identify some of the solutions to recent surveys that we did of the public as far as the challenges that they see with our transportation system. And then finally, earlier this year, again with the City Council's support, we did a comprehensive amendment of our sidewalk usage ordinance. Again, working with downtown Sioux Falls, some other stakeholders, of looking at ways that we could address the usage of the sidewalk for vendors, for other kinds of special events. Some information on construction permits, which is one of the key indicators as far as our community. And this is a 3-year snapshot of actual numbers, the number of building permits that were issued, the amount of fees, the number of housing units, and then the valuation of the permits. Of course, we're now starting to ramp that up again from the bottom of 2009. And so the bottom part of this chart shows you through the end of July where we're at in 2010 compared to 29. The number of permits is up. The amount of permit fees is up significantly, although the number of housing units is still down from last year. Single family through the first half of the year was very strong, primarily because of the federal tax credits that were available. And the total permit valuation is also ahead of last year by about $20 million. So those indicators, I think for this year and hopefully into next year, are showing that the building construction activity will be stronger than it was in 2009. Although I think it's going to take a while before we get back up to the numbers for 2008 and especially for 2007, which was our all-time highest number. Ramping into a little more, or I should say focusing in a little more closely on the projected revenue for next year of $2.8 million. About 83% of that is proposed to come from various types of licenses and permits. Our biggest revenue source is the building permits that we charge, and that's projected to be about $1.25 million for next year. Other permits that we issue for electrical, plumbing, other kinds of licensing charges is projected to be just over $1 million. About 4% of our revenue is proposed to come from charges for services, and that's primarily for applications that we get for board meetings to the Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment. About 9% is projected to be from intergovernmental funds, and that's primarily from federal funds that we get for transportation and transit planning. And then about 4% for fines. Those are primarily citations that we collect throughout the year for different kinds of code enforcement activities. The next slide is another historical tabulation on building permit revenue. And you can see going back to 2001, the historic numbers, and then where it's at for this current year and projected to be in 2011. One of the reasons that there's that kind of anomaly for 2010 is that when we put together the 2010 budget, it was about March of 2009. And of course, we weren't sure if the economy was going to start coming back. We all thought it was going to start coming back sooner than it did. And so we were overly optimistic, I think, as far as what type of projected revenue we could get from building permits and construction activity. And obviously that number is higher than we're looking at now. So we're looking at a more conservative, hopefully more realistic number for 2011. But it's always kind of a guessing game. I mean, there's not a real scientific method that we can use to anticipate the level of construction activity from one year to another. You can look at short-term and long-term historic trends, but it's not a perfect science by any means as far as anticipating the level of building construction activity. So again, as we look in 2011, more detail on what our expenditures are. The operating budget, $4.3 million. Of that, $3.8 million is personnel, and about $500,000 of other operating costs. Kind of the same message that you'll be hearing from most departments is that we are primarily staffing costs. We have a very limited capital budget of just over $100,000. The next slide, our capital budget is primarily two projects, which is the Downtown Historic Facade Easement Program. That's a program where the city can take applications for developers that want to make improvements to historic buildings within the downtown area. It goes to the Board of Preservation with a recommendation on which of those applications would be funded, and then ultimately to the mayor for final approval. And the purpose of having that program is as an incentive for people to make investments in some of the downtown historic buildings. The project One of the projects that currently underway this year is at 10th and Main, the Howman Insurance Building, or the 10th and Main, the old car dealership building is going through a major transformation. The other capital program that we deal with is the Sculpture Walk, and that funds the purchase of the People's Choice Award each year, which then the City Council makes a decision as to where that sculpture should be placed. In terms of our operating budget, of looking at our personnel and other operating costs, again, some of the issues that we looked at for 2011, we've had a couple reorganizations that we're dealing with this year that will have some impact on 2011. Earlier this year, we finalized a process of identifying within each of our inspector groups a lead inspector, the building inspection, plumbing, electrical, and mechanical. And we did that as a way of helping not only with some of the administrative duties, but also as a way of dealing with more of the day-to-day decision-making. If there's an issue within that inspector group, there's a code that needs to be interpreted, or if there's an issue where we need to meet with a contractor or an engineering consultant, that the lead or chief inspector can work with their team to help facilitate that and get those decisions made on a quicker, timelier basis. And then, of course, most recently, Mayor Huther announced that there were a couple changes between planning, public works, and community development. We're gaining a staff person from public works, but we're also going to be turning 2 people over to community development. And so those staffing changes will have an impact not only on the operating budget, but also some of the activities. And of course, we know that there's going to be more of a focus on code enforcement coordination. And I anticipate that within the near future, we're going to be requesting coming to a City Council informational meeting to give you kind of more an outline of our strategic planning process of how we're going to deal with this whole area of code enforcement coordination going into next year. We also want to make sure that we spend our money wisely in terms of training, and that's one that Councilor Brown, I think you asked one of the earlier budget presentations about training for staffing. We know that that's always a challenge for us every year to find the money of what the staff would like to do versus what we really need to do. And so our priorities in making those decisions are things like where we know that staff need to be certified. Those would be the highest priorities in terms of use of our training and travel money. And then also looking at things that we can do, more online types of programs that we could access, and cutting down on the actual cost of traveling to someplace either in-state or out-of-state. Another challenge for us is working with independent contractors. The 2 key things that we get involved with are through our code enforcement with dilapidated structures, of securing buildings, and then also demolishing buildings. We have a process that if the property owner or the owner of the structure is out of compliance, and after going through the notification and citation process, that there's still a violation, then we can order buildings to be secured, which means that the openings, the windows, the doors are closed, secured, so that they're not accessible to the public. And we can also order buildings to be demolished. And so typically when those things happen, we pay a contractor up front, and then the cost of those, either the secure of the building or the demolishing of the building, is assessed back to the property owner. And so as we look into next year and even this year, again, it's not always a perfect science for us to estimate how many buildings, how many properties are going to be required to hire a contractor to have this work done. We also have the responsibility under the current budgeting process again, of hiring contractors for snow removal. Right now, community development is charged with the enforcement of the sidewalk snow removal ordinance, but the funds to hire the contractor are currently identified within the planning and building services budget. And again, we don't really know from year to year what potential money we might have to spend on hiring a contractor to take care of ongoing violations. And then the last thing that we don't see up there, but as we look into 2011, one of the changes that we're seeing is that trying to anticipate potential employees that are retiring. And when an employee retires, there's a cost, there's a payout that we have to incur. We are anticipating the potential, at least, of 3 of our employees that could be retiring next year, at least that will be eligible for retiring. And so we want to identify what those potential costs might be for those 3 persons. So those are some of the major considerations that we looked at in terms of our 2011 budget, but you can see that it's not really changing dramatically at all. And then finally we get into our performance measures. As far as the orderly and efficient development of Sioux Falls, completion of requested plans and reports. This is primarily through the planning division. Jeff works with the planning staff to put together a work program, and through that work program we can identify either plans that we're going to generate ourselves or plans that we'll be partnering with other city departments. And so again, we know that number can fluctuate from year to year, and as we're looking at 2011, that number we're anticipating would be 5. And those can be everything from a more comprehensive downtown development plan or a specific neighborhood plan, or in the case of this year, the comprehensive zoning update. The development plan application to the Planning Commission, again, our benchmark is that we want to have that no longer than 60 days. And as we've talked about our public notification process, right now the application deadline to the Planning Commission hearing is less than 30 days. But there are occasions where if there are neighborhood concerns or questions, that those hearings can be postponed for 30 days. But it's very seldom that we would ever go beyond a 60-day time frame for a Planning Commission decision on those particular items. And most of them get resolved within that 30-day time frame. And educational outreach can be, again, it can be everything from working with neighborhood groups to having our monthly briefings with the Planning Commission. Through our building services, we work with a number of different trade groups, as well as all kinds of different boards, commissions, and committees. And so we're constantly working with public on outreach, whether it's informing the public or providing educational opportunities. And that will continue into next year as well. We're also looking at continuing with our one-day benchmark for non-residential requests for inspections and one-day approval for building permits for residential projects. And in fact, in most cases, if you come in for a building permit request to build a house, that can be done in much less than one day. It can be done in a matter of minutes in some cases, depending on the amount of information that's provided. And that's a benchmark that we're very proud of and that we hope to continue on into the future. The other one that we showed is that through our zoning enforcement process, that with the voluntary compliance, which means that if there's a violation identified, we send a letter letting the property owner know about it. And in 65% of those cases, it's done voluntarily before it has to go through the citation process. So what that means is that if you're illegally parking your RV in somebody's driveway, just use that as a hypothetical example.
Thank you.
And or any other kind of zoning in violation. And as I've said before, when you add the citation process into this equation, we're up to about 95% compliance. But there's no doubt that going into next year, I'm anticipating that we're going to be more active with zoning enforcement as we are with code enforcement, just because of the fact that we've been trying to promote a more proactive enforcement process, that we've made the public more aware of how to complain, and that we know that with the continued growth of Sioux Falls and some of our neighborhood issues, that we're going to continue to get more and more cases where there is either a complaint or that we're going to be going out and identifying potential violations. And that's the end of the formal presentation. If you have any questions that either I or Jeff could answer.
Any questions for Mike or Jeff? Councilor Brown?
Mike, you referenced the downtown revitalization, the facade easement program, and I believe one of the goals that was talked about in the budget address was making sure that downtown is a place to be, but yet we're seeing I believe about a 33% cut in that program. How do you align that with that goal?
Yeah, we've modified that dollar amount over the years, and typically we've been able to fund anywhere from 1 to 3 projects. Our current policy through the Board of Preservation is the maximum one-time project can get $100,000. And as we looked in 2011, the number of applications that we're getting is starting to decline a little bit. The scope of the projects are getting a little bit smaller than what they have been in the past, plus the fact that much like other city projects that go out for a bid, those are coming in a little lower than what they have been in the past. So it's just looking at maybe trying to create some more efficiencies in 2011 as part of the team process of helping to address the overall budget constraints.
Plus, we have a finite supply of buildings that are eligible for that, and we're
Yes.
probably nearing the end of that.
Well, I think we might potentially be nearing the end based on the current standards and guidelines.
Okay.
And if there's a continued increase in interest of maybe non-historic buildings, that there's another maybe way that we could change that after 2011, so that if you're not a historic building, there still could be some use of those funds for
Dressing
building
them up.
Yes.
And then, will the Development Foundation, Downtown Sioux Falls, Forward Sioux Falls, will they stay under your department, or will they move to community development?
Those are going to be moving to community development.
Okay.
CCOG will stay with our office.
Okay.
But Downtown Development Foundation, those will be moving
Forward
to
Sioux
community
Falls.
development. Yes, community development.
And then you also oversee the contract with SMG, correct?
Yes.
We're short of time today, but I do want to talk to you because I've heard I have some people that have questions about that going forward, so I'll email you that.
Sure, be happy to talk to you about that.
You know, I might add that I'd hate to rush this along, but maybe if we could, at our next budget hearing, we could maybe start with Mike and kind of wrap up his...
Then I may have to request some overtime pay.
That's fine.
I guess we can work
request
around that.
Sorry, that's been cut, Mike.
Okay, that's for next year.
Let's do that.
I'd be happy to do that. Okay. That'd be fine with me.
Thanks, Mike. Let's
Sure,
do that.
thank
So
you.
we can get a couple other items in before we break for dinner. I need to cover one other item first, is that the informationals and budget hearings will be replayed on Channel 16 Wednesdays at 6:30 a.m. and Wednesdays at 10:30 p.m., as well as Saturdays at 3:30 p.m. So if you're looking for something exciting to watch, tune in to those times. They've been they've been changed so that they can account for the extended period of time that these meetings have lasted. A couple of the items that we switched from our open discussion was the event center and the RV topic. Real quick on the RV, the Land Use Committee discussed this at some length and suggested that the rest of the council put some skin in the game on that discussion and vote. And I think maybe to expedite things, we'll recover that at another time. But I'm hearing overwhelming support for like a 3-month moratorium. No, I'm teasing. Everybody, I'm getting an earful on the subject, but I think the intent is to have a compromise of some sort. That's why I brought it forward and brought it up, and maybe an attempt to make it easier. Councilor Erpenbach.
I would just add to that if we could put this out there a couple of months, let's just say we're not going to cover it for a couple of months. We really have some things that are way more hot issues, way bigger things to be dealing with right now than the RV issue. And I too have heard from lots and lots of citizens, and I appreciate each one of them that calls me or emails me. I really do, either side. But I think that we need to put that out there a ways so that they know that it's not a burning issue right now. We're not voting on it next week. Let's put it out there a couple of months at least.
It's not a burning issue, but I'll certainly do whatever the council wishes. But it is certainly within our capabilities to manage more than just the budget during this whole cycle. So but we'll put it off a little bit so that it can cool down, I think may be the right term. But another item that we have is we wanted to discuss the event center. The mayor has a request for $500,000 this year or for 11 and $500 for next year. And we really don't have a presentation from the mayor planned on this for a while yet. He is still working those details out. But we had a concern from councilors to maybe start this discussion and maybe understand better what we want to do, what we're expecting, in fact, even maybe come up with questions for the mayor so that he knows what we're looking for. So I guess I'm throwing this out, at least for a short period here, to start this discussion. Some of us, at least Vernon and I, and Councilor Litz and Anderson, voted on the recommendations from the last task force. And I believe that resolution existed for as long as that, the previous administration was in place, and that sense has changed. So I think there's a lot of things in limbo, and we're trying to add some clarification as to what this council wants, what this council will support. And of course, we're waiting, and we'll get a plan from the mayor on what he's proposing. But any comments or thoughts on the subject so far?
Councilor?
Yes, Councilor Rolfing.
I would be, I'd be very interested and very hesitant to vote on approving $500,000 until I heard what the mayor had to say with about his proposal. And I think it would be very wise for us to discuss that beforehand. And so that would be where I would stand at this point.
The mayor is going to give that to us as soon as he can, and then we'll certainly have that discussion.
Good.
But we've got our budget hearings here, and I don't know that we really have that outlined on our schedule, but there's any other further plans that we want to have him do or maybe recommend that he have ready for us. If you'd like to just wait until we get it from him and then we can think about it after that, I guess you can do that.
Well, I would hope that it would be before, significantly before we had to vote on the entire budget, so that we would have time to discuss it with him and perhaps come up with a workable plan that we can all agree on.
Right, and that was our reason for bringing it up kind of now, is to kind of maybe push it along a little sooner than, so we're not rushed too much. Councilor Erpenbach.
Well, do we want to lay out questions that we have for the mayor? Is that what you're looking for? Do you want to hear the concerns that we have ahead of time? Or what is it that you're looking for?
Well, myself is I'm looking for a position from the council on what we're expecting to have happen in regards to the event center.
Well, if I can just address that just for very briefly, there are 4 of us sitting here this evening who all ran this spring And every time we were in forums, we were asked about the event center and what did we support. And I remember all of us going on the record as supporting the task force's proposal. And as far as I'm concerned, and I've said this to all of you privately, that proposal is still on the table. There has been nothing that has taken that off the table as far as I'm concerned. And one of the things that I heard from all of these folks is that the council would take leadership on this. And so far, all we're doing is sitting and waiting for the mayor to give us some kind of proposal. So I'm concerned, as you are, Councilor Jameson, that we aren't taking a leadership position. That if this is that important to us as a city, that we need to move forward. But we need to move forward in the way that we talked about it with the citizens to begin with, and that starts with a public vote. And that hasn't been talked about for months. And I think that's the first question I have, is where is the public vote and when is the public vote and how does it fit into a timeline?
I would think, okay, Councilor Intiman.
I think everybody knows that I was a very strong proponent of the event center, and I still am. The finance plan that we had put forward before, people asked when we were coming up with a finance plan, what's your plan B? What's your plan C? In true honesty, when you're coming up with a plan and trying to figure out a way of presenting how you're going to pay for it, you develop one plan and you work around that plan. Because that's where you have to focus on, because people would automatically want to take and say, well, let's go to plan B or plan C. It doesn't hurt quite as much, okay? Well, you really can't do that. We made the efforts, we made the attempt, and we failed at the attempt. I agree. People want an event center. I don't think that they want another study on the event center. We've studied it to death. In fact, I've prepared the reports of the previous 3 event centers, and I handed them to all the council people as well as to the mayor and to Darren Smith so that they could review the executive summaries of those along with the financial performance that we had come up with. The question we have is financing. The people made it very evident that we couldn't finance it on the back of the citizens. And I believe a good method of approaching this is with a concerted effort to go out and get private commitments along with then figuring out how we can finance it with public funds too. With that in mind, I think I've expressed that to the mayor, what my viewpoints were. And I would hope that as we go forward, realizing he got thrown into the budget process immediately upon getting elected, and he's been hammering on that. Well, and it's my understanding that he will be to us in a short period of time with some information and with his proposal. And I want to listen to his proposal. I think most of the people know where we stand on it and where I stand on it, and I'm willing to listen to it. And hopefully, I hope that our leadership encourages the mayor to come forward with it sooner than later so that it can be very much a part of this budget discussion as we go forward. And coming up with a vision of where we're at. We know he says we're going to build it within 4 years, but we need to know a vision of how we're going to do it, how we're going to pay for it. And for those of us that are committed to it, I want to get busy and work on it.
Okay, so I have 2 items written down. One, that the council would recommend and or advocate a public vote by the city. The other is that we're looking for funding options and how this event center would be paid for. Anything else that we should share with the mayor to help him?
I just want to hope that we're involved in the process. I think that that's key. I think we've got a lot of input. We've got a lot of knowledge base from talking with our constituents also. A lot of us have been involved with some of the discussions in the past, as well as we have a number of resources in our community that have been involved, from Sports Authority folks to a number of other people that have provided us with some very important information. So I hope that as we go forward that we can encourage him, the mayor, to involve us and involve some of those folks as we go forward in discussing and looking into opportunities.
I think that's right. And Councilor Jameson, I would just add that those 2 items you have written down are in lockstep with each other. That vote has to be based on the plan that Councilor Enneman is talking about. We have to know finances before we can do anything for voting.
And also, Councilor Jameson, that the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be.
The longer we wait for...
To get the plan out.
Yes. I agree, and that's some of the pressure that's coming along from some of us to really start this process right away and have as much discussion as we can. Okay, I think I've got, anything else? I'll share these with the mayor and certainly pass these through with our leadership meetings, and I know there's going to be a lot of discussion about it. It's one of the hottest items that I get contacted about. I'm sure some of you as well, especially on the campaign trail, too. Any other items that we should consider today? Seeing none, we'll adjourn, and we'll be back right here at 7.